bad decisions.
Yeah. So I thought I'd go ahead and start recording here.
Yeah.
Let's look at that a little bit. So we're looking at our draft here coming up next Saturday, Kentucky Derby Day.
Woohoo!
We've got to uh, make some picks here sometime. I don't know if but we can do it.
It's a slow draft, so we'll have time.
Yeah, we'll
But
have time. But I was just wondering if we do the show that morning, what
ooh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I was just thinking we could
We
I
might
don't
see it
know.
unfolding as it goes. Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be fun.
yeah, wait, we have to see the we'll get a share of the Kentucky Derby odds. We'll be looking at that.
We'll have some fun. We'll have some
Mhm.
fun. Yeah, I'm looking at that 11th pick and
Yeah, so
in
we've got the Boilermaker crawfish, we're
yeah,
11, and then you wisely did 2-3 for Aaron Rodgers, and
yes.
I forgot
Yes.
we got that That's a bonus.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Professor, is
Oh, that was a good. Yeah,
I'm not a person who trades for the sake of trades. Okay.
that
So
was a good trade to get out of.
if I'm making a move, there's a reason. And we were great at quarterback. We
Yeah, we
had
were.
three other really solid quarterbacks, and we had Aaron Rodgers. And to be honest, if that trade had not gone down before the draft last year, I
We
might have cut him.
yeah.
So we ended up trading and getting a future 2-3. And here's the thing in Dynasty.
Yeah.
People will be like ultimately very stingy on whatever draft is coming up.
And historically, Dennis, quarterbacks with these guys, this league is not as valued as others.
No, no.
So
And
you
it's
got,
yeah,
to get that
yeah.
is a great deal.
Yeah, so it's a one quarterback league that
Yeah.
we're
It's
in.
not super flex.
It's not super flex. We have Goff, Richardson, and Stroud right now at quarterback,
Mhm.
and we're content. We can make some moves. I wouldn't be adverse to trading. Um, Either Stroud, probably Stroud would have the most value right now. If people wanted to bet on Stroud and wanted to give me a first round pick,
Uh-huh.
I would grab it, even if it's first year or first round next year. I would
Uh-huh.
take it.
Uh-huh.
And quite often in dynasty leagues, what I've found over the years, and it's even more true in this league,
Uh-huh.
people are willing to trade their future draft picks
Mhm.
and give you more
Right.
because it's a year away. And the way they do their leagues in FPPC, and as this isn't a criticism, I enjoy the strategy being different in different leagues.
Right.
But one of the things that's intriguing about this is you don't have any taxi squad, so you
No,
can't.
we do not.
I can't hide a rookie.
But
So
that makes you yeah, Dennis, it's harder because
yes,
of
it
that.
is.
It's
Yes,
stringent.
much harder
Yeah, you're not
for
just
strategy
able to
decisions.
forage and
Yes.
hoard versus because here, I think the forage and hoard taxi, at least, I'm not a dynasty expert by any means, but from my point of view, looking kind of out in, if you're good and you're in a league that there's maybe two or three good players and the rest are ho hum, you have a great advantage. Whereas these FFPC, you don't have as big an advantage. And I have found a lot of these guys that were in the league, they're good. I mean,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
these are not just people wandering off the street. It's tough. It's a competitive league, and people, this is a good league. So it's good people, and there's not a lot of place to hide things, and you don't get to forage and hoard a lot. In the taxi squad, you got to forage and hoard on your main roster.
Yes.
And we've done that
Yes.
with running backs over the years, and you've put us in position. Last year we came in second. Good job, Dennis. But our running back strategy, the patch and field, you're just, you could give a clinic on that. I think we were coming into the league. I felt we were mid pack or maybe a little high, maybe third or fourth. And you put us into the second at the end because I think that patch and field strategy that you do and your MVP is better than the public on running back. So I think we have an advantage again. And I'm curious on the MVP on rookie uh, running backs too. We probably should do that test at some point. I don't know, like a career
Yeah.
arc.
Yes.
I mean, if we had 10 years of MVP, Dennis, eventually we're going to have enough data that we can look at that, in 6 years, what are we saying? What's the MVP 6 years before versus, 6 years after? What did we get for all that? In other words, to track it good, we're still doing beta testing on your MVP for rookies. I
Yeah.
feel we're
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
trying to figure that out, but I predict that we're as good or better than the public on rookies. And so
Oh,
that gives us an
yes.
advantage.
Yeah, and we're good with the rookies, not because I spend all of my waking hours studying game film. Okay.
No.
Here's what I do. I watch some games, but I watch some games if there's players I'm interested in. So I'm already looking at the 2026 class
Yeah.
because I follow a couple of people on Twitter. John Laub is one of them who plays a lot of college fantasy football. And in fact, they've tried to get me in every year. They try to recruit me for what's called a college to Canton league,
Mm-hmm.
the ultimate dynasty league, where you score college players and pro players and you hold on to that player's rights
Mm-hmm.
from college all the way up through the pros.
Right.
That is not something I'm probably going to ever do. Like there's too much work. There's too many possible players that you have to consider, and
Oh,
you
did
also
you?
have to.
I just hit our uh, name, Boilermaker, and it
Yep,
shows exactly all our pick. I didn't
yep,
know it would do that.
yeah. They have a pretty. You have
Yeah.
to like
Okay.
work.
I'm sorry, Dennis.
You have
I
to
don't know
work.
what I'm doing.
No, you have to work at finding these little secrets on FPPC. They don't really give them to
Yeah.
you a lot,
So
but
anyway, get
it's
back
there.
to your
Yeah,
Canton
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
yeah. So in a Canton or in a college to Canton league,
Yeah.
you have to make some decisions that are beyond the scope of what a lot of people look at. So I could probably do well in those leagues, but it's just so hard, so many layers of strategy because I have to decide, do I want a guy who might score a lot of points in college
May not even make it to the NFL.
but might not make it? Yeah. So it's there's a trade-off there, and I don't even I someday when I feel like I've mastered regular fantasy football
Yeah.
and I need a new challenge, I might branch out because it's no different than I got really good at regular keeper leagues. And quite frankly, FPPC is sort
Yeah.
of a crossbreed between a keeper league and dynasty because you can only protect 16 players every year.
Uh-huh.
And and you got to protect a kicker and a defense. So you really only have 14 players that you can retain the rights to from one year to the next.
Yeah.
So that's a lot trickier because most of my in rosters are small and no taxi squad. So You have to make decisions in a different way, and you have to be willing to occasionally lose a rookie who isn't ready to start yet, because you need a starter this week at a particular position and you only have 20 spots. Like most of my dynasty leagues, I got 30-man rosters, 25 to 30-man rosters. Then I got a taxi squad. Then I got IR spots. We have IR spots, but you can't use an IR spot for anything but a guy who's on the IR. So last year that hurt us with Cup because they never officially put him on the IR. So we were holding on to him, obviously, but he was eating a roster spot, and that really hurt us in bye week time. So I love the strategy decisions you have to make, but because of the way these leagues are set up, you could sometimes get huge values for future draft picks. And when I traded Rodgers away, my rationale was, well, first of all, we shouldn't be carrying 4 quarterbacks in a 20-man roster. That's crazy. But part 2 of that strategy decision was, and that's in a 1 quarterback league, folks. Part of my other strategy decision was, what's the least I would take for this guy right now if this was this year's draft? And I said, well, if it was this year's draft, I'd take anything starting at maybe the 10th pick in the second round or higher, whatever I could get that was better than the 10th pick in the draft. So getting the 3rd pick ended up being a bonus, but I had to wait a year for that bonus, which I was okay with, because the other reason that I traded him and wanted to accumulate another second round pick for this year is because following John Laub and seeing what was coming in this 25 class, I knew it was going to be a rich running back class, and we are short of running backs. Like if we have a weakness on the team, it's running back, because I'm feeling good about Hawkinson and Ertz at tight end. I'm feeling great about our wide receivers. Look at us: CeeDee Lamb, Higgins, Smith, Kupp, and then we got Waddle sitting there. We got Waddle on the bench. This is a guy who's got a career best MVP in the 90s, and we have him on our bench. That's a luxury. Running backs, we're tough. Irving, Hubbard, they'll get it done. They're going to get some volume. Hubbard might be replaced by a rookie, and no, not last year's rookie. He might miss another season. They did draft a pretty decent running back. They got a kid out of Tennessee that I like a lot, Dylan Sampson. We might add him to our team in the 3rd round.
Right.
And then, or late second. How about this? How about if we get a running back at the end of the 1st, a quality, like impact potential player at 203, and then come back and protect our Chuba Hubbard investment with the rookie that's on the roster. We can't get Dowdle, okay, unless Dowdle's available in free agency. I don't think he is. But I like that opportunity to grab a rookie and to see. And if it doesn't work out, if he's 3rd on the depth chart week 1 and we need to make a move, we have a guy that we can get rid of. That's the way you have to play this style of fantasy football. You got to say, hey, look, I'm not going to cut a guy like, let's say Bucky Irving didn't start until week 6 or 7 last year. No way in heck am I getting rid of him, because I think he can be a top 6 RB in fantasy football. That's what I thought, and that's why we drafted him.
Yeah.
Other guys like Tyrone Tracy that we had on our roster and lost, I figured Tracy's upside was maybe 18, RB 18. That was not enough to say he's a can't touch. And we had to patch and fill. We won a couple of games playing the patch and fill game off the waivers during bye weeks. And we went to the playoffs and we finished 2nd. We cashed. Yeah. That's the way you got to have a short-term memory in fantasy football when you are dealing with a roster like this. Now, other leagues where I had Tracy, he was on my taxi squad, and he didn't come off my taxi squad until he was a proven starter.
Right.
I don't have the luxury here, so I have a different strategy. You've got to fit the strategy to the rules. And that's the biggest mistake that I see people making in every form of fantasy football. They don't understand the rules in their particular league and on their particular platform. FPPC strategy is a lot different than Yahoo. It's a lot different than Sleeper. It's a lot different than ESPN. It's just because of the rules that you have to attack it in a different way. And I like the challenge because if all I wanted to do is make money, I probably wouldn't play FPPC. FPPC's got some hellacious talent over here.
Yeah.
This is like the major leagues of fantasy football.
Yeah.
And I want to win in the major leagues. I don't want to just take people's money by being an average player. I want to have to be a really good player in order to win money. Hey, I'll play in enough of the other leagues where I'll cover my losses
Right.
if I have losses. But last year I won in FPPC too. So
Yeah.
I had a profit there. So that's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I, my FFPC journey, it's been just getting better and better. But I'm not sure if it's our metrics. Part of it I know is I don't play early leagues anymore. I did the checking. I looked at the temporal analysis of my drafts and my June and July and May and April. I wasn't making money, so it's foolish to bet on that suddenly changing. In other words,
Yeah.
I would love and I wish we had more really players that we could talk to that were good, that had a that would win. I wonder if there's an opposite of me, somebody that doesn't do good in August but kills it in May and June. If there is such a player and they happen to be the two or three that listen, we need to talk because I can help you in August. And I would love to get your views of, June and May and whatnot. Try to find what are you doing? I just wonder. I mean, I can imagine, Dennis, you know, but what are some, in other words, what are some of the characteristics of somebody who can win in June and make money? I'm not saying, 100 leagues and you win one. I understand well, I won. No, no, no. I'm talking
ROI.
making money, right?
ROI, baby.
Right. And that's how sometimes I think that people miss that. They'll tell, well, boy, I
Yes.
sure was, my guy last year was X and Y. What did you make money on that? What does your diary say? Come on, be honest. But I would love to pick somebody's brain. For like I said, I'm not proud, Dennis. If somebody can help me win more money, I want to listen.
So
If EF Hutton talks, I'm listening.
so Professor, I know of one of those people.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
You ready?
yeah,
It used to be me. So
yeah.
here's what I discovered
Okay.
in the years we've been working together,
Yeah.
because you reminded me of something
Uh-oh.
in our very early days
Uh-oh.
of doing this podcast together.
I reminded you.
You
Okay.
reminded me of something that I had gotten too lazy to do,
Uh-oh.
the diary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was because of our talking about horse racing and how that mentality crosses over into fantasy football. And when I was serious about horse racing,
Yeah.
I kept a memo book in my back
I
pocket.
think you said your dad used to
My
keep
dad did that as
do
well. Yes. Yep.
stuff on like betting, when it rained and all this other stuff that
Bad
post
trips.
positions,
Yep.
all this.
Yep.
I mean,
Oh yeah.
that's how you make money in horse racing if you're cautious. In other words, your dad seemed to be thoughtful. You can't just bet every race and win, right?
No, no, but
You got to
you
be
also have
like a guerrilla handicapper. You hide in and
yep.
get your spot, you attack it, and then you drop back down. And
What one of
that's
his
what you've got to do.
one of his most amazing things that I learned from watching him in horse race handicapping that I now apply to fantasy football. Okay. And it sounds weird to say that, but there's quite a bit of crossover.
Oh, there is.
So many years ago in harness racing, there was the introduction of something called the single shaft sulky. Okay. So the shaft came over the top of the horse instead of coming around the horse.
Hmm.
And it cornered different, especially on the half mile tracks. It looked weird to see it. They used to call them the swinging sulkies because it looked like they were swinging around the turns a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But what he knew, because he was keeping the stats, and at the very beginning, the very first introduction of these sulkies, there were only like 5 of them on the entire circuit. So you would not usually have only like 3 of them in a race. And it wasn't in the programs yet. But he kept track. And here's the crazy thing: in a mile race with the right horse, it could increase their speed in the mile by over 2.5 seconds.
Wow.
Huge advantage. He kept track of those notes.
That's at
And then,
least 2 links or
oh yeah,
more, probably.
huge, huge. You're talking you're talking a fifth of a second is a
Mm-hmm.
length in harness racing.
Yeah. So
So
more than that, then.
yeah, so you're talking about horses who could now go 3 wide on a half mile track and not lose position.
Wow.
And you had certain drivers. There was a guy by the name of Jim Curran who was better in the single shaft sulky than anybody else. And if Jim Curran was on that horse for the first time with a single shaft sulky, the horse had been finishing 5th, 6th, 4th, not looking good in the program. Now all of a sudden they switched to the single shaft sulky and they put Curran in the bike as a catch driver. These horses were winning at 7, 8 to 1, like
Nice.
at a half mile track. That's unheard of. Well, what happened was it was such an advantage. The track had a decision to make. They either needed to start putting this information into the program or they had to ban the sulky completely because it was such an unfair advantage. It was affecting the odds. And if they didn't want dumb people gambling, I guess, because they decided to put it in as a special symbol
Yeah.
in the program. And they went back and changed all the past performances
Right.
and encountered so you could see when the single shaft sulky, then my dad's advantage went away.
Yeah.
See, if everybody started using our statistical tools, our advantage would go away. So we're only trying to help the smart people. We're letting the dumb people who still want to count on points per game, air mileage, whatever they want to use.
Air mileage.
I just
Baggage weight. Yeah.
I say that jokingly, of course.
Yeah.
We're talking about air yards. But, all of this stuff that are all the cool kitschy things to use. I love to see new strategies out there from some of the biggest names in the sport. I loved when zero RB became bragged about by so many people. I used it for a couple of years, then it got popular, and then I went away because you cannot stay with the consensus and expect to win. If you stay with the consensus in fantasy football, you're going to win because you did get lucky in the playoffs. If you beat the consensus, you will outdo the bad luck of injuries, especially if you got good strategy decisions. But I was one of those people, Professor, that did better in May and June than I did in August.
And
But because
yeah,
I tracked it, because I tracked that and saw it, and I saw how I changed my forecasts from May to August, I
yeah.
realized I was letting group think get to
Oh,
me. I
okay.
was letting the consensus convince me I was wrong. And all of a sudden it was like that. I was like the fat guy in the bathtub.
Yeah,
Eureka. I
yeah,
spotted my mistake. And now I get better as the months go on. And we should, because we have more knowledge, and
yeah.
knowledge is power. But I was one of those guys who was really good at the early portions. And maybe that's why I'm good at Dynasty, because I'm I'm not good at telling. I could not tell you right now, Professor,
Mhm.
whether Travion Henderson, Ashton Giante, Caleb Johnson, Jordan James, Devin Neal, any of those guys. And so I picked a guy from all over the draft picks,
Yeah.
earliest to one of the latest. I couldn't tell you who has the most talent
Right.
as a college football player. The pros seem to think they know who will project their game the best to the NFL. But
Mhm.
what I can tell you right now on April the 27th, there are 6 guys right now, 6 rookies that were drafted this week
Yeah.
that by week 4 of the season, I will be very surprised if they aren't leading their team in touches every week. There are 3 more guys that I think have the potential to by week 6, week 8, be leading their team in touches. Now, that doesn't mean that they couldn't do it on week 1. Okay. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm just saying a few weeks in, these are the guys. A few more weeks in, these are the guys. But there's only 9 positions, maybe 10, maybe Dallas, but they didn't pick a guy until pick 149. But there's at the most only 10 of the 32 teams that will see a change of who gets the most touches. This has nothing to do with injuries. This is just playing ability. There
Yeah.
are up to 10 guys that could displace the current RB1 on those teams. The first 6, I think, are almost a lock. 7 through
I assume this is opportunity,
correct.
so
Correct.
you'll be informing us with an article,
Oh,
correct?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and here's the thing right now, Professor.
Yeah.
I feel really, first of all, we know that I'm
You're
better.
feeling your oats. If folks, if I had to guess, this man's feeling his oats. He'll finish up his oats in the stall and he's going to kick down the door. That's how he's feeling today.
But here's why I'm feeling that way,
Yeah.
Professor.
Yeah.
And it's because we know we've been doing this together long enough, and
Yeah.
you have been grading my success and failure,
Yeah.
and the numbers say I'm pretty damn good at running backs. And
Yes.
and And when I say I'm pretty damn good at running backs, you know what all these guys, all 10 of those guys have in common?
No.
Here it is.
Yep.
Right now, they are guaranteed to
Guaranteed.
be guaranteed
Yeah.
to be no worse than second on the depth chart on week 1. Unless
Nice.
they get hurt. Unless they get hurt. Or they're just so bad. But right now, going into training camp,
Right.
if a coach looked at his team and did it out of logic and not out of getting a rookie inspired to work harder, because rookies come in, and Jaden Daniels came in as the RB or QB3 in mini camp. I mean, that he knew he was the best quarterback on his roster, but the depth charts are phony. Don't look at the depth charts from the teams. They'll lie because they're trying to motivate their rookie. But right now, those 10 guys, I can honestly say they're the second best running back on their team. There's no question about it. And I'll go even farther and say that even Cleveland, here's the crazy thing. So Cleveland picked 2 running backs in the draft. The second one went on pick 126. So we're talking a fairly early pick for a second running back. And he's a good one. Dylan Sampson's no slouch. I can make a case that Dylan Sampson and Quinton Judkins are right now the first and second best running backs on that roster. The only guy they got to compete against is Jerome Ford. I don't know if and they're ahead of Strong. I mean, they're already ahead of Strong. Yeah. So, and Ford's contract is up pretty quick. So, that's end of the year. He's gone. They don't need him anymore. So they're going to be pushing the rookies. And they're a losing team from last year, so they got nothing to lose there. So I would say right now, I have maybe, I would say 11 guys that are first or second on their roster, maybe even more. I mean, DJ Giddens with Indianapolis might be number 2 on his roster, even though he was picked 151. Mm-hmm. Cam Skatebow is probably number 2 on his roster. Mm-hmm. Those are guys that, Mullings from Michigan, he wasn't drafted until 188 by Tennessee. He probably is number 2, although they got Spears and Pollard. So you can make an argument that he's not quite there yet, but by the end of the season, he could be. Brooks, Cincinnati grabbed him, pick 193. He's got a shot at being the second best. He could beat Zach Moss. None of those guys I just mentioned, I don't think they're going to be the number 1 running back on their team. It's possible, but I think they're going to be top 2. And if they're top 2, that's worth looking at in dynasty fantasy football for sure. In fact, in larger roster dynasty fantasy football, anybody with a pulse, anybody who makes a roster is worth putting on the roster. And, but you just have to have a different mentality. Now, I just spent the last couple minutes telling you how confident I am at running back. How about this for honesty? I don't know what the hell to do with these tight ends. I don't know what to do with these quarterbacks, but you know what I think that might mean is I don't take any of them in redraft.
So as long as you note that in the diary.
Yes.
And Dennis, I wanted to share this chart. This was, I followed this guy in this guy over here, and you can see Raul, I guess. Rai. I'm probably mispronouncing his name.
Oh, yeah. Rua. Mauricio. Yeah.
Mauricio.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Smart guy.
Yeah. Well, he saved me time This is rookies drafted from 2012 to 2023. He posted
Ooh,
this.
wow.
Skilled players drafted, grouped by day one, two, three, and I guess Pro Football Reference. So I probably need to go visit. But I don't know if he changed, put the color in. But anyway, he saved me time, and I thanked him. Uh, so long story short, when I scanned this last night, I didn't note anything different this year in, say, the tight ends or the quarterbacks.
Yep. Yep.
You know, I mean, I noticed a few things, but nothing really crazy that's like, wow, this is a weird year. And folks, I always talk about top down and this reference class forecasting. This is an example of using that data just to get a thumbnail of feeling of how the draft went
Yep.
here.
Yep.
And so for quarterbacks, five in days one to three, five.
Yep.
Last year we had six, but day one, zero, day two, three. So that isn't. So I would say last year, Dennis, was an unusual
Oh,
year
yeah. Yes.
versus this year. I mean, look at 22, 23. I mean, 19, 17. I see a lot of years where two, three, so five, it's not much different than many of the year. But last year was weird. So if you thinking there's more Jaden Daniels and whatnot from last year, just remember it was a very unusual year. And
Yes.
so in your diary, this data, Dennis, I think just this is a place to start. In other words, take a look at your opinion last year. Having six on day one, did that make a difference? Since that's very, I mean, look about it. Since 2020, we've had five in 21, five in 18. So I would say, look at your diary. What happened? What was your opinion in 18, 21, and 24? And how is that different than 25, 23, 22, maybe 19, that kind of thing? In other words, this is how you start constructing problems uh, to address, right? A hypothesis. So I would argue something was going on last year. And I'm curious in the career arc of those quarterbacks, Dennis, in 6 or 7 years, did that really tell us something? Did 2024 tell us something? In other words, in 2018, I'd have to go back. So, folks, I would say go if you're really curious, go back to 18 and look at the career arc of those
Yep.
five.
Yep.
And I don't know who that was in 18, but Dennis probably remembers because Dennis got good, but I don't remember. So that's an example. So running backs, Dennis, only two day one. And
Yes.
when you look, the highest has been three, but a lot of, some years has been zero. Look at 2024, zero. So we didn't have a Saquon that year, last year. And that's it. So I would argue, look at the zero uh, arcs, career arcs. So we probably know 2013, 14. I would look at those and see the data. If I had more time, if I could assign my interns, that would be what I would assign. But folks, here it is. I shared it. I'm telling you, that's a problem. If you're in Dynasty, Dennis, and you're playing, and I think if you want to up your game a little bit, I'm not saying I'm gonna have time to do that this year, but this is how I would approach it when, you know, looking at this data, that's how I would ask these big questions like that.
So
And yeah, so
here's a
go
couple
ahead.
here's a couple of things that I spot real quick, and especially at the
And
quarterback position.
folks, when I show Dennis the stuff, part of the process is getting Dennis's patterns going.
Yeah,
See, his spider sense is tingling, and he's going to tell me. So he saves me some time.
yeah.
He's as good as about half an intern. Just his pattern gives me a half an intern advantage.
Well, look at the cycle. That's right
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
18 to 21 to 24, every 3 year cycle of having hitting a max. Now, we didn't do it in 15, but we came close. And
This
we
is
did it.
quarterbacks.
We did it at 12, yes.
Okay.
And I'm talking about first round picks.
Yeah.
So here's an 18.
18, 21, 24.
An example for you in 18.
Yeah.
First guy taken, Baker Mayfield.
There you go.
Still a starter this year.
Pretty good career arc.
Good career arc. Not great
Not
early
great.
on.
Not of Mahomes.
He went up a couple of years. Then he went down.
Yeah.
Then he switched teams. And now he's been going up.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold, taken number 3. He failed with the Jets.
Yes, he did.
Sensational last year with Minnesota.
So there's
maybe,
2 right there. I'm wondering the team concept. They're switching. It's kind of like getting a dropping class and a jockey change. All of a sudden, the horse wakes up. Same thing.
Better trainer in horse racing.
Yeah, that kind
better
of thing.
Success on the trade. Number 7, Josh Allen. I'd say he had a pretty good career arc.
Oh, yeah.
Number 10, Josh Rosen.
Ooh.
Historically a failure.
Ooh.
It was horrible. Josh Rosen he's gone. Already gone from the league. And the last one taken with pick 32, Lamar Jackson.
Wow.
So
that's a good year.
So 5 of the 6 are still starters. 7 seasons
4 of the
later.
5. Oh, you're talking day 2, 3 as well.
No. 5 of the 6 right there. There were 6 of them taken in the first round.
Well, it says 5, right?
2018. I thought it said 6.
It says 5, doesn't it?
Oh, I thought I saw 6.
You're
first round. 2018.
It's 5.
It's 5. Okay. Well, I counted 6. 1, 2.
No, you only told me 5.
Okay, so there's 5.
4 or 5.
So I can't count. So 4 of 5, 80%.
Yeah,
are still starting now. That's a pretty good percentage. That's a really good percentage. Now, let's compare that to running backs. So you had 3 taken in 2018, right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's look at the running backs. Number 2, Saquon Barkley. He's a bum. I don't think he's going to amount to much. The second one taken, 27, Rashad Penny. Injuries. And in the 31st pick, Sony Michel had a little bit of bright spot early, and then injury, never the same.
Yeah.
So what that tells me is 4 of 5 at quarterback, 80%. Are still in the league. They might be starting for somebody else, but they're doing well enough that they're still in the league. 1 of 3 at running back. But here's the key, Professor. When it comes to the NFL draft, we think in rounds and days too much. If I were to break this down, I would do it a little bit different. Now, Rue is fabulous, okay? And he's doing it in a very smart way by rounds because that's the way everybody thinks. But what did I say about thinking like the consensus? So when I look at a draft, I look at it very different. So I look at it 1 to 10. If you go in those first 10 picks, you better be great at football because that's expensive draft capital. Now I look at the teens and 20s. together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at the 30s through 50s. I start widening out that view. Only 10 in the beginning. Then it gets bigger, moves to 19 players in that second tier if I'm looking at draft position.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm looking at 30 players at that point. So I've got my 20s and 30s, I'm sorry, I got my teens and 20s, then I got my 30s through 50s. So I'm looking at 30 different
Dennis,
players.
before I forget, what I would do, folks, is take this data, break it down.
Oh, yeah.
Dennis is trying to do by,
yeah.
say, tens. I would probably come back and do a 5-year arc or something with maybe wins or some type of metric per year, kind of get a grand metric.
Yes.
And I would do that. And then I would look at the old box and whisker
Yes.
in different, like top 10. Like Dennis is saying 10. Is it maybe really 12? Is it really 8?
Yes. Yes.
And I think box and whisker, if you go through that and use a career arc concept, I think you could find, is it really every 10? Or does it go 1 to 10 and then 11 through 30, maybe? In other words, that next break may be different. So if I had time and I had interns, so I keep saying that, Dennis, because I'm trying to entice ESPN, give us some resources and we could really hit this hard, folks, because I see how to do this. It's unlocking the puzzle for me, and in quick statistical visual approaches, we could highlight this data. Dennis and I could do it. We could knock it out of the park. And the only thing is we make it harder on the top dogs because they wouldn't have their advantages. So we would, kind of like introducing the buyer number. All of a sudden, everybody can do it now. And so we're going to make some people mad. So they're probably telling us, shut up, Bush. This is us. Shh, don't tell anything. Doing the old cut the throat. You're like, shh. If you and your buddy, as a young man, I know you trod the bar and you were trying, if you were playing the wingman, and if you realized they were in the wrong, the wrong area of the bar here, so it's a dud. Like, come on, man, cut this short. Let's move on.
Wave them off.
Wave them off. That's what you're doing. And so I know there's these top dogs. They don't want us to be saying this magic stuff here because that cuts, but that's how I would do it, Dennis. So I do agree.
Yes.
This is just a beginning.
Correct.
Folks, this is just the scaffold. But no, we're not putting the last brick on the house. But this is a beginning.
But what I will say, Professor, is if you were to look at these numbers
mm-hmm.
and you would compare those numbers to my research that I did this year, where
mm-hmm.
I was looking at finishing positions of the rookies.
Yeah.
I will pretty much tell you that your spike years
mm-hmm.
of guys finishing in the top 12, for instance, as
mm-hmm.
rookies
mm-hmm.
will probably work out okay when you look at the big picture. There will be some exceptions.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing that I'll say is, so in everything that I do, I have a rule of thumb, but it doesn't mean you can't ignore that rule of thumb. So in other words, I just broke down my draft picks and all that kind of stuff. But looking back a couple of years, one of the guys that I had rated, and again, I didn't have Puka Nacua as my top rookie. when he came out. That would have been insanity. I'm not that good. But I had him at about my fifth best wide receiver because I was looking at opportunity. And by opportunity, I thought, man, this guy could do it. Now, I didn't put forecasts out until this year. Like, this is brand new territory for me, getting this gutsy. I played a little bit with it last year on my MVP for rookies, but I don't like the way I did it. So I scrapped it and I'm coming out with a different methodology this year. I'm thinking in ranges for the rookies even more than I do for the veterans. And my rookie ranges are going to be pretty absurd. Like, they're going to be larger than some would think will be useful. And what I'll use one example, and I put out the articles before the draft.
Yes, you did.
Handicapping where I thought they were going to be. Okay. And I put out my instant reaction on day one. And why did I only do that for day one? And I haven't done it for day 2 or day 3. And I will not do it for every single player taken like I did in the first round, because first round is special. First round is premium. If you are spending a first round pick, that player is going to get every chance to succeed in your offense. So Matthew Golden at Green Bay. So you know how I feel about crowded rooms at either running back or wide receiver.
Yep.
Right? Hate them. I love this one. Why do I love Green Bay's crowded wide receiver room? Because their MVP scores are all very close from last year, and they're all under that 80 minimum that scares me. Now, I will say Jaden Reed has had in his career an MVP over 80, but last year he was 47.1. Dobbs was at 15.4. Watson was at 8.3. Wicks was at 30. Ugh.
By the rule of thumb that I've seen Dennis do, that tells me there is opportunity for the rookie to be the top dog.
Yes. And the year before, okay, so we're looking at historic history of these players.
Yeah.
Reed was at an 80 as a rookie. In 23, Dobbs is at a 50. Watson was at a 55.6. Wicks at a 33.3. What do you notice there? No dominant guy.
No dominant guy.
What if Matthew Golden is really good at football and everything falls in place for this guy? His upside potential is WR8. That's his ceiling. Okay. I think he can be the 8th best wide receiver in fantasy football in weekly value, meaning his MVP index will be the 8th best in the league. I think it's a possibility. But his floor is 31st. Huge difference. That's 23 places. When I forecast the range for an established veteran wide receiver, might be five positions. And will I be right all the time? No. But I also know if I'm going to be wrong, it'll be higher. Or if I'm wrong, it would be lower. I'll have an idea. But that total range, if I look at even, the ultimate floor, ultimate ceiling, and I'm not talking if he gets injured.
No.
Because obviously the ultimate floor is 0 points.
No.
If he gets hurt before training camp. But what I'm looking at with a normal player, maybe 5, maybe 10 positions, 23 between his highest high and lowest low. I don't think he can finish outside the 31st position if he stays healthy. That's not asking a lot. It's 31st. If you look at 31st in a typical year, okay, that's 60 in MVP. I think he can hit 60 or higher on MVP because Reed did an 80 as a rookie.
Yeah.
And Reed's wide receiver room was just as crowded. Well, one less. But there's no dominant wide receiver in that group. And everybody in that group, with the exception of Reed, is gone after this year. So in Dynasty Fantasy Football right now, Matthew Golden is my WR2. I just picked him up at 204 in a recent draft. People are going to be lower on him because the room is crowded. Normally, I would say yes. But I know 80 or lower, 80 or more on MVP is the minimum you need to hold that top spot on your team. That's 22nd best in the league on average. If you're not 22nd best in the league, you're probably vulnerable to losing your position the following year. That's my theory that has worked quite well and has bagged guys like Thomas last year, Puka the year before.
Gotcha. Okay. I tell you what, I'm actually looking at some ADPs here for the rookies. Maybe we should start the show.
Let's jump in and talk a little bit about that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, and what your opportunity, because I think when we talk about, because I looked at your Golden, and this site I'm on says he's WR4. They've got Travis Hunter is WR1. So
Yeah.
I think that gives a springboard for you to discuss and me to kind of tweak a little bit here.
Sounds good. Let's jump into the show. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the Science of Fantasy Football. Why the Science of Fantasy Football? You get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use the scientific method. That just means we're going to be a lot smarter in how we handle statistics. And we're also not going to be afraid to have a hypothesis, test that hypothesis with honest statistics, and throw the damn idea away if it doesn't work. That's the scientific method in action, folks, and that's why it'll make you a better fantasy football player. And joining me as he does on each and every episode, hey, he's the one that started all this nonsense. So we've got to listen to him. He's a smart man, and he is a professor. He's the fantasy professor. He's a real professor emeritus. It's John Bush. John, welcome back. The draft is over. We know who gets the Hall of Fame jackets and who's an absolute bust.
Wow. Can I bet some futures on that? Can I bet some futures? I hadn't even looked at Vegas. We should kind of, I'm curious about the the rookies here and who's the best rookie. I'm sure you can get some future bets coming here. We do need to investigate. I do have a little bankroll. I made money last year, Dennis. It was my local casino, Oaklawn Racetrack. They have a sports book there. One day when you come down, Dennis, it's an interesting place, sports book in a horse racing environment. I mean, it's different than I've been to Vegas. I've seen their sports books, and it's just, I don't know, the field is different, and it's just interesting. But they have comfy chairs that you can sit in and watch. And I'm a people person. I do like people that are very emotional in these games, and and you've seen it at the racetrack as well.
Oh yeah.
And letting the emotions run crazy. And folks, I think and part of your success is if you are the person that gets angry easily about things, that should be your goal this year, is to try not to get, kind of the sports radio concept, the
Oh yeah.
best ever, the worst ever, the absolutes, right? My team is the best. This guy's the worst. And throw out absolutes, think about range of outcomes. And if you've never done that before, I believe if you started working on that this year, trying to read up, go to Google, range of outcomes for predictions. Just put that in and start thinking about that, and then taking your diary. If you've never done one, you can find my video lesson on diary, but start looking. I mean, if you just looked at the draft, if you watched it on NFL Network, and why don't you start writing down some? Maybe you're great at tight ends, rookie tight ends. I don't know why you would be, but in case you are, what you don't want to be is good at tight ends, but you don't use that data, but you're the worst at running backs, and that's what you try to use to beat the league with. In other words, you need to play to your strengths, but if you don't know what your strengths are, Dennis and I, part of our method is we look at our track records of our metrics and we try to find out where we're good and not. So just remember, there's too much emotion in this. One does need to realize it's not the best ever, it's not the worst. We laugh about that. And that's why Dennis started out with the Hall of Fame yuck there. But folks, if you feel, yeah, damn it, it is the best in the world, folks. Range of outcomes. Here's another little hint, little tweak. Range of outcomes, Dennis.
So here's an interesting little exercise, if you will. So prior to the draft, what I did is I looked at the rookie class at each position and I said, okay, who are the guys that I'm really sure are going to be drafted and are going to have a chance to go on and do something in fantasy football? And I laid out my fictitious bets, and that went all the way down to having a buck bet on the field, because I was smart enough to realize there'll be somebody drafted that I'm not counting on. And maybe that guy will be the guy that ends up being the best rookie quarterback in this class. And I'm only, for this sake of this bet, I'm defining best in rookie class to be most points scored as a rookie. So that includes how many games did the guy play? Because in fantasy football, that can be a valuable thing, especially with rookies. If you got a rookie that was fabulous down the last 4 weeks of the season, yeah, he helped you in your playoffs. But if I grabbed him in the first round in fantasy football, or even the second or third rounds in fantasy football, he cost me more games than he won. If I survived the regular season, he may have been the reason I won my playoff, but I paid too much for that player. So having that in mind of how I'm grading these players, 1 year, short-term lens. This is not a dynasty view of where their upside is as a whole career thing. So I had 11 quarterbacks that I said, you know what? Crazier things have happened. The Brock Purdy's of the world have happened. So I had 11 guys that I said were possible. Guess how many of those 11 got drafted by NFL teams in 257 picks?
No clue.
11 for 11. Can't
Not
get a whole lot better, right?
Nope.
So I'm pretty good at quarterbacks. So I did the same exercise for running backs. Now, in the running back field, I left a little bigger. I left $2 on the field. So I guess you could say I felt twice as likely versus quarterbacks that somebody I left out of my group could be an impact player, could have, the upside. So I had 13 running backs that I put on the list, and then field covered all the rest of the guys because I knew there'd be a few guys that I was lower on than the league was. So out of those 13 guys, all 13 were drafted. None of the guys in the field, in the rest of the guys that I left off of specific bets, were drafted in the first 104 picks. So I think I had a pretty good read on running back this year, right?
Yes.
At tight end, I'm going to skip ahead to tight end.
Okay.
There's a reason.
Okay.
So at tight end, I only had 8 of those guys.
Yep.
And I also said the field was worth the $2 out of 100 bet. So again, twice as high as of my uncertainty as quarterback, and about equal with running back. At 8 guys on that list, all 8 were drafted. 6 of those 8 were drafted in the first 67 picks in the draft. I would consider that to be a pretty darn good record on tight ends.
Yep.
Now we get to wide receivers. And yes, folks, it shows that I'm not perfect. Amazing.
What?
What? So here,
off the show you go.
It's amazing. So first of all, I bet $3 on the field. I was less confident that I would have all the wide receivers in my top group accounted for. And here's the problem is, we were talking on the pre-show about the noise in the fantasy football world, the consensus. You can't help but have the consensus pull you slightly. And with rookies where I don't have any data on them, it's even more a possibility.
Here's this is your predictions.
Yep.
So I pulled it up. This is from the article.
Yep. So at wide receiver, there were 11 guys that I had in the betting pool. And then $3 on the field, which said my uncertainty was greater at wide receiver than at any other position.
Yes.
Out of the 11, 8 of the 11 were I'm sorry, 9 of the 11 were selected in the draft. 2 of them weren't taken at all. And one of them was taken with pick 136.
Yeah.
I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 10 guys in the field, meaning guys I didn't mention by name, that were drafted before the last of my hits. That's horrible. That's awful. It tells me I don't have as good of a read on the wide receiver class, but look at my field bet. It was greatest. I knew going in that I had more uncertainty, 3 times more uncertainty than at the quarterback position. So this exercise that you made me do,
Dennis, this is the way to do it.
It forced me to think, and it forced me to put money on things.
And Dennis, if we could ever get 2 or 3 other folks that are into this kind of stuff, the rookies, I'm not. Imagine having, like, the Daily Racing Forum used to have the sweep, the Herman, all these different experts picking. It would be nice to look at everybody. And I know you say, well, you'd probably end up with the ADP. I bet not. I bet, and not only that, but the other players could see where they were good or bad.
Yes.
And there's a book called The Good Judgment Project or
Yes.
Super Forecasting. I think they turned it in to that book on Amazon. If you want to read on how they did this, and they used this concept of a money bankroll, and that allowed people, in other words, the concept was you can take $100 and bet on one person. If you're 100% sure that's the number one pick and there's no other, no other possibility, I'm betting my life on this pick. This is the first wide receiver off the board. And Dennis, you would have said McMillan,
Yes.
but only 20%. But I'm
Yeah.
saying if you would have bet 100, by the way, McMillan, was he the first wide receiver?
Other than Hunter, who's like a
Hunter was
hybrid.
first. Which
Hunter's a
one?
Hunter's listed first as a cornerback. Now I listed
But I
him
mean,
at
which
wide
one was
receiver.
drafted first?
Hunter was drafted first.
Okay, so
But
you would have lost that bet. Your life is forfeit if you would have put $100 on McMillan. You
but
lost.
no, well, I'm forecasting two different things here.
Yeah.
So if I had forecast who I expect to be the first wide receiver off the bench, off
Yeah, I know.
the
You were
draft,
betting
I
top.
would add 60 on Hunter. I'm betting who's
Yeah.
going to be best in
Yeah.
fantasy football
Right.
points.
But that, I was just giving
Yep.
that as an
Yep.
example. But I think, folks, that is the way to do this. And I would bet if we could get a group together, we could bet the futures at Vegas and have our own. I think we could have an advantage, Dennis. If think about if we did this for 3 years with say five or six other sharps and we saw everybody's record and one or two were the best at wide receivers. Maybe there was a tight end expert. Man, we could make some serious money. And I'm telling you, there are probably not in fantasy football, but I would think in Vegas, there's probably groups and they probably have AI computers and
Yep.
they are putting together groups of people and computer programming and algorithms to make money at Vegas on that. Because I know in horse racing they're doing that as well.
Yeah. And one thing I want to point out here, if you look at this chart, see how far down Matthew Golden was
I see that. And I
before the
was
draft.
just thinking, Dennis, if he's going to redo this first opportunity, that'd go up.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So right now, and I'm not completely done with the numbers yet.
I would like to see your new numbers.
But my first take on the numbers,
Yep.
McMillan now at 40.
Wow. Doubled.
Love the landing position. So
Where
at
did he
the
land? Because Dennis, I hadn't paid it.
Carolina.
So
He,
you're assuming the quarterback has made some progress too.
no.
No.
Neighbors was towards the top of the list. He was number one last year
Mm-hmm.
in this metric, and he had Daniel Jones and the feeble all stars, like every quarterback under the sun, and he still kept producing. Brian Thomas Jr. was number two. He lost Trevor Lawrence for most of the season and had backup quarterback. So those
You're
guys,
thinking this guy is quarterback proof?
he's going to make the quarterback better.
Okay.
Okay.
40.
That's how good he is. 40 is a lot of confidence. Now,
Dennis, what's
I,
the odds in Vegas on this guy then?
he should be, again, if you're talking total fantasy points, it'll probably be close between McMillan and Hunter. But what I'm telling you is the landing position of Hunter,
Yeah.
he was at 12 going into the draft, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I have him at 15 right now.
Boy, not much movement.
Not much movement. And the reason there wasn't much movement is because he's behind in the pecking order Brian Thomas Jr., a rookie who had a 105 MVP score last year. 105 is damn good.
In the last few years with MVP and rookies, is Thomas the best?
He's up there among the
Who's
best.
better?
I think Chase was better his rookie year.
Okay. What was his score?
It was, I think, 120. Yeah. It was in the 120s. So here's the thing.
Okay.
His rookie year, T. Higgins was pretty damn good. And now I'm going to specify what pretty damn good means.
Yeah.
Let me get the stats so I can tell you exactly where he was.
Yeah.
So T. Higgins, his progression, if you will. If you look at his MVP, and let me make sure I can find this daggone thing. Got to make sure I sort this in a way that I can actually find the data when I need it. So T. Higgins, as a rook, 92.
That's still above 80.
92 point.
And it's close to 100.
Really strong. Okay. The next year, when he had to share those touches, and Chase, his rookie year, went up to he was actually 112 his rookie year. 112.5. Higgins dropped to 78.6. So here's the argument. If Higgins had posted a 105 that year,
right,
I might say right now that Hunter could displace Brian Thomas Jr. at the top of the heap. If let's say Thomas was only a 90 last year, he was only in the low 90s. I'd say, you know what? It's possible that Hunter is so damn good that he could do a Jamar Chase on Brian Thomas Jr. I don't think it's likely, but I still got the forecast at $25. That's pretty daggone good. Okay, or I'm sorry, at $15. So that's pretty darn good. My number 3 guy right now, wasn't even on the list.
Yeah,
or was
in
actually
the field.
Yeah, well, he was he was on the list. Jaden Higgins at 10. So right now,
how much would you put him on?
Yeah, he's at a 10 right now. So he went 10. Up from 8 to 10.
8 to 10.
But I've got to work these numbers out because I need
what
to
I'm hearing
a
is
few more.
McMillan really stepped up.
Yes.
Where's Golden?
So
you
here's
were talking him up.
Correct. So here's the way I've got it tiered out in fantasy football right now. I got McMillan in a tier of 1 all by himself.
Well, at 40, how could you not?
Yeah,
he owns 40% of the betting pool.
And he would
be odds on.
Correct. And I may come down on that a little bit, but he'll still be the top dog. So I might steal $5 from that because I might want to put the $5 somewhere else.
Yeah.
Golden and Hunter are right there, 2 and 3. I got Golden ahead of Hunter, but they're close enough that they're in the same tier.
Gotcha.
Then I've got Egbuka, Betch, Harris, and Higgins as the next guys in their own group.
So Egbuka really took a drop down.
Didn't like that landing position.
Where did he end up?
All. He ended up with Tampa Bay, who not only has one guy capable of being over 100, but they got 2.
It almost reminds me of JSN.
Yes.
First year.
Or Roma Dunze last year.
Yeah, you had Metcalf and Lockett, and he was the third dog, and it took a while for him to chew his way up.
Correct.
To where now he might finally collect. So this guy, Dennis, if this guy, let's say, underwhelms this year, that may be a good opportunity for you to try to grab him in various dynasties
Oh
that
yes.
the owner may
Yeah.
be disappointed.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And Besh went to Las Vegas. He does have a similar style to Jacoby Myers.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
All right.
And you know that Jacoby Myers is a guy that I like a lot.
Yep.
We have had great success drafting that young man.
Yes.
Jacoby Myers was an 86.7 last year.
Mm-hmm.
He was a 75 before that, and it was an 84.6 the year before that. And that's all been alternating between the top dog and the second dog on the
Mm-hmm.
team and still being able to perform very well. So Besh has his hands full because he's got a guy over 80 that he's competing with. But
Yeah.
that's why he's in the third tier.
Yeah.
Jaden Higgins went to Houston, where he cannot be the top dog,
No.
but he could be the Devonta Smith type second wide receiver who can do very well. So Devonta Smith, 92.3, 87.5, 76.5 his last 3 years. He's been going up. Slow but steady improvement. He'll probably be over 90 again this year, even though he's got A.J. Brown on that same team. A.J. Brown, 132, 106, 100 his last 3 years. So two really good wide receivers can live together in an offense. But I don't see a way that Nico Collins, barring injury, is going to not beat out Jaden Higgins. But Jaden Higgins could beat out the rest of the rookie class. If I'm wrong about McMillan, Golden, Hunter, then he is in that fourth group. Plus, for Dynasty, Nico Collins eventually will come up on another round of free agency. And he does that, just for a reference point now, he does that after the 27 season. Mm-hmm. So looking longer term, Higgins probably could bet, but you know who else is not an awful bet is Noel, who Houston also selected at pick 79. So they went 34 and 79 with wide receivers from the same college, both from Iowa State. So, and you notice Noel doesn't even show up on my list. He was in the field. But you see that the field was equal to the worst, the lowest actual bet that I was willing to make. Yeah. And so I feel pretty good, even though I was worse at wide receiver, because I forecasted that I would be worse at wide receiver. I felt pretty good about this whole exercise. And now we'll see if I get better with more knowledge, because I should get better on my forecasts post draft, which I will put out the first week of May officially. And I should get better first week of August too, right? We should improve with more knowledge. If we don't, then we aren't very good at the process of getting smarter with more knowledge. And with rookies, who knows? My best forecast might be pre-draft. We don't know until we test it out.
I do want to bring up that having a metric, the one number, allows you to talk and communicate and envision this range of outcomes concept. In other words, I believe, and I talked about that people were the best or the worst, and you should think about range of outcomes. Well, part of that is having some way to describe the outcomes. This is percentage of success or of high scoring, and having MVP shortens, I think, your learning curve, Dennis. I think that's what we are doing. We're in the middle of crafting metrics. And again, it may be multi lines, different metrics to make a grand metric, right? We experimented with that, but that allows you and I to discuss players in a way that the concept is when we say the number, when you say an 80, that tells me something. When you tell me it's over 100, because I'm familiar with the language of your MVP metric, and eventually may that may combine with something else. It could be the the Dennis Bush metric or the Dennis John metric, whatever it is, we are working. But that's in other words, Dennis, you're so into it because you're thinking in those concepts. It's
Yes.
like a
Yes.
language.
Yes.
And if people don't have that, then you're left with, well, he's better than that one. But what is that when you say McMillan is better than Hunter, and you'll say it on Twitter, that doesn't tell people. Versus McMillan is a 40%, Hunter is a 15%. You see, by defining that if people are familiar with any kind of gambling, that is telling you strength of opinion, that is telling you a metric that you can follow, right? In 5 or 6 years, boy, Dennis, every time he's above 40, he's right on. He's righteous in his picking. Or, boy, Dennis overinflates.
Yes.
But if you don't have that, you'll never know it. And so what happens, it's an etch a sketch, right? Then every year, yeah, he was good last year or bad. My dog getting excited because I'm shaking my hands, Dennis. If you could see me, I'm going to turn the video on. But I'm thinking every year, I think if you don't have metrics or don't have concepts that talk about a percentage, you just shake it and it's, well, who's good this year? What does that mean, good? In other words, it's just harder. You make your job harder by not doing metrics. You're saying, well, it takes a lot of work to get Dennis's metric. Yeah, it does. But the payoff, right? It's Dennis is chopping the wood so he can make the fire. And if you don't chop the wood, but you sit around and you rely on somebody else's fire, I hate that. You know, where learn how to fish, right? It's the old joke. Teach them how to fish. That's what we at Science Fantasy want to do. Is not just give you the fish every year because you don't appreciate it and you don't work hard and you get sluggy. You're like Jabba the Hutt. You sit around on your throne and where's my fish? It's like, think about it. When I had cats, Dennis, I think I told you this, I would take the turkey and I would sweep it across they were Persians, and I would make them jump up on their legs and swat the turkey to kill it. That gave them a little incentive to move and to have that hunter instinct. And that's what you need to do. That's why I got my dog here gets a bone and I'll grab the bone from him and hey, get that killer instinct here. And that's what we've got to develop by your MVP. We've got to develop that concept so we can talk. And you and I are already talking in that language. And that gives us an advantage. We're going to walk into draft night out and we're going to be talking stuff. They'll be, what's the MVP? What's that mean? They're looking around and, it's their time to draft. And that guy said this and what, and folks, you got to find your spot in a thinking hierarchy, right? You've got to have a thinking architecture that you build, and you have it's your process is banked on having such a concept or thinking in probabilities. What Annie Duke told us, Dr. Duke in her books, you should read on poker. thinking in probabilities. We are trying to think in probabilities. Dennis has told us Macmillan is a 40%. That's thinking in probabilities, and we can test that.
And here's the other thing that I'm not sure right now. I see so many fantasy football people, they're putting their 1 through 36, because 3 rounds in a typical 12 team
Right.
league is 36 picks. So they're putting 1 through 36. This is my cheat sheet for Superflex. This is my cheat sheet for one quarterback.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah.
I don't know where to sprinkle in the top quarterback or the top tight end yet. I don't know how to switch between running backs and wide receivers yet. What I know is this:
Yeah.
the best running back right now
Yeah.
is the chalk. It's Ashton Gianti. You don't take a guy in the top 6 at running back unless you're pretty sure he's pretty damn good and you're pretty sure that every other team is going to take this guy if you don't take him. So he's definitely going in the top 10.
Yeah.
The NFL is right more often than they are wrong. And quite frankly, the NFL is right on talent more often than Mel Kiper Jr., than Field Yates, than any of these other experts that are out there, including the self-proclaimed experts on Twitter. And while I'm on this subject, I have to go here because there has been so much of an uproar over Shedeur Sanders dropping in the draft. A few weeks ago, I said, I don't know if any of these quarterbacks will finish in the top 18. I thought it was more likely that they all finish outside the top 18 in fantasy than have one finish inside the top 8. That is not a ringing endorsement for this rookie class of quarterbacks. So it wasn't racism. It wasn't that he's Deion's son. It's very possible that the last 2 years we saw the constant buildup of how great this kid was to push TV ratings for his football games. He might have just fallen because, hey, you know who the last big quarterback that was Big Ten Player of the Year at quarterback, and this is back before the Big 12 basically started changing its membership and having a lot of teams go to other divisions that were the toughest teams in that conference years ago. Hey, Big 12, that used to be made up of guys like Nebraska. It ain't anymore. But it was a guy by the name of Chad Pennington who led the Big 12 in passing when it was actually a better college football league than it is right now. He was drafted pretty darn high. Did they get a gold jacket ready for Chad Pennington? Or is Chad Pennington out of the league pretty daggone fast in his career? You can be a very good college quarterback and have your game not translate to the pros. They're saying all white people, they want a humble black quarterback. I don't know if that's true or not. I just know in my lifetime, one of the most popular black athletes when you and I were growing up was a boxer.
Oh.
But originally by the name of Cassius Clay.
Yeah.
I use that because his mama calls him Cassius. Yeah. There's a joke there, folks. It's a movie joke. Yeah. Was there ever a more cocky and conceited athlete of any color than Muhammad Ali?
He was out there. Very very bold in his picks and what he was going to do to his opponents.
Was there ever a more revered boxer than Muhammad Ali, even among the
No,
white people who supposedly
I
hate
never
brash black
even,
people?
well, I never, that just wasn't something I focused on. I, I paid to go see. It was closed circuit TV back in the day, Dennis. You'd have to go.
He was a showman.
Yeah, he was a showman. And,
Here's
uh, and he had, but I think a lot of the wrestlers these days, the ones, everybody's doing it, but in the 70s, I remember a lot of the wrestlers I like, the pro wrestlers,
yep.
in quotes, they were doing the showman. Gorgeous George
Oh,
in the
yeah.
1950s started that whole,
Yes.
and Cassius Clay had seen Gorgeous George, and man, this guy's
Absolutely.
got a stick here. And there were people before that, P.T. Barnum had it. I mean,
Yep.
that's just the whole thing of being a show person and, moving yourself up, becoming more popular, you make more money. That's just, these rock and roll bands, Kiss, they had all these pyrotechnic. I mean, that's just the whole shtick. It's an entertainer. He was an entertainer as well as a showman, and
But
Joe Namath. I'm
I'm
gonna
winning the
win the
we're
Super
winning the
Bowl.
Super Bowl. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of being an athlete, and if Sanders is gonna be a showman, then I know his dad was a showman. He'd
Oh,
catch
yeah.
that ball and run it back, and it was amazing. I'd loved to see him being successful. I wasn't, and I hope his son is too. But
Yes.
but Cleveland, I, I worry that's not where I would have wanted him to go. I would have liked to seen him in a different spot. I have concerns about Cleveland.
Oh, absolutely. And but my point is Mel Kiper Jr. was having a meltdown for the
But isn't that his
entire
job
it's his
to
job.
jump
And
up? I mean, have you
but
seen some of his picks? I saw a thing about where he was wrong on quarterbacks. Did you?
oh yeah. Well,
Yeah,
here's the thing. If you look at his track record
yeah,
of mock draft picks
yeah,
and them going to the team that he predicted them, it's
yeah,
7%, Professor.
yeah.
7% of the time he's right. Now, that doesn't mean that he's wrong on player talent evaluation. Okay.
Yeah.
Mel Kiper Jr. probably knows much more about talent evaluation than I do. I'm fine to concede that. But I also don't say things like, if LaVisca Chenault isn't the greatest wide receiver in pro football history, I'm gonna quit the fantasy football game. He did that with Jimmy Clausen. I don't remember Jimmy Clausen being a success. Mel Kiper Jr.'s got as many misses at quarterback. He thought Jamarcus Russell was going to be all
Yeah.
that. Ryan Leaf was another can't miss. Have you ever noticed that I don't say a guy is a can't miss prospect?
No.
They're going to miss. Like, that's the thing. But when I measure people with that, so I just wanted to get that rant out of
Okay.
my brain because it's not racist, but everything's got to be turned into the race card. If the NFL had not drafted a single black quarterback this year because they're backing off of their DEI thing or whatever you want to blame it on, If they had not hired a single black coach, a single black general manager, let's say they got rid of everybody and whitewashed the entire league again at quarterback, GM, and coach and coordinator, turn it into an all-white league, I'd be the first one saying there's something here, because there's a lot of good talent at quarterback. There's a lot of good talent as a head coach or an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Yes, the NFL has a problem when it comes to hiring black quarterback or black coaches. And it has a problem with giving black coaches less of a leash than white coaches. That I will concede, because the numbers tell me that. I've looked at it. But a player in the NFL, I don't care if the guy has every stereotype going for him or wants to be as, whatever. I don't care how he dresses, what he does, what he says. If that player is deemed to be one of the top, like, let's say, a generational talent, everybody loves using that phrase too. But if the NFL is really saying this is the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck, this guy could have played around on a unicycle, juggling, whatever. He could have done whatever he wanted to do. And an NFL team would draft him with that first pick or second pick. Or they'd draft him early because he was that good. And they would have paid him big money because he was that good. You know why I can say that with assurance? No. Deshaun Watson had 30 sexual assault complaints against him in civil court and was given the biggest contract in the history of pro quarterbacks at that time. Totally guaranteed, even though he hadn't really played in a whole year. If there was a thing, and yes, years ago, Warren Moon couldn't get a job as a quarterback. Guys came out of college that were good black quarterbacks, and they had to play wide receiver, cornerback, or running back. They couldn't get a job in the NFL for many, many years until brave coaches were like, this is stupid. What are we doing? And they changed. Warren Moon helped make that happen. There was a time that the NFL was racist at the quarterback position. They might still be at the head coaching position. Those numbers are pretty low compared to the amount of good talent that has come up through the coaching ranks. But at quarterback, look at your roster of best quarterbacks on my MVP index last year. There was Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and every other quarterback was non-white. The NFL has no problem with brash quarterbacks. Jalen Hurts is a pretty brash guy. Patrick Mahomes is kind of brash. Patrick Mahomes said, we're going back to the Super Bowl. That's pretty brash. The NFL's got no problem with brash. Brash is entertaining. What they have a problem with, maybe, is a guy who doesn't take meetings seriously and doesn't have the resume to back it up. And maybe the last time they drafted a great Big 12 quarterback, and it was Chad Pennington, and he didn't work out, and this guy reminds him of Chad Pennington with his numbers, maybe that's why he didn't get picked. I feel
Dennis, so I'm just letting you go.
I feel so cleansed, Professor.
That's good. That's good.
But Professor, I will have an article this week laying out some strategy in Dynasty for folks. Even though I'm cutting my own throat, I'm sharing the stuff with you. And why am I doing that? Because I want it on the record. Yeah. I want to put this all on the record because I want to get better. And you don't get better unless you put it out there publicly, so I can go back to a time-stamped article and say, see, this is what we did. But, and you were mentioning, before I went into my rant, you were mentioning about having an index. The reason I have an index is because I think in indexes. I think in patterns and indexes. because I'm a weather forecaster. That's what we do. That's how I'm trained. That's how my brain works.
Yeah.
That's why the MVP index exists. But I kind of like having a stat where I could say, okay, how good is 80 at wide receiver? Well, over the last 5 years, 22 guys, the median 22 guys had 80 or more as an MVP index. And over that 5 year span, the low is 19 and the high was 26. 19 to 26. That's how many guys are going to be over 80 in MVP. So if I get two starters that are 100, I now have a built-in advantage because the average team has only got one of those.
Gotcha.
So that's why I think in indexes. Well, Professor, last week we promised folks we would dig into more of your statistics.
Okay, we can do that. I was actually going to continue the uh, I'm looking at a cheat sheet of the rookies and noticing some things, but we could talk about
I would love to hear
what would you like to
what you're
do?
thinking
The
about.
only thing is, this is where I'm at right now. I will give you kind of an update. I have been working on ADP from 2019 to
Ooh.
2021, and I'm looking at the top 36 by position and seeing the beginning, before the season and after the season, and trying to just get some reference of how good or bad things are. I have done running backs, tight ends, wide receivers. I haven't got all the stats and data, but I've got the raw data figured out. In other words, I could give you the misses and the hits and things. I've done this for fantasy points per game. I have completed that study, and
Ooh.
I do have that data, which you've never seen in quarterbacks, tight ends, running backs, and wide receivers. What I'm doing, and this just a preview, we will get to this, but uh, I was thinking the rookies may be what we ought to do today, but I'm going to then compare my Bush number to if people use last year's fantasy points per game as a metric,
Ooh.
or if they
Yeah.
use ADP, how does my number compare in my top 12,
I love
the
it.
next 12, I want to see, do I have an advantage? Because you've said this multiple times, because I showed you the study where they looked at handicappers and gave them different amounts of information and looked at their accuracy versus their confidence.
Oh yeah.
And that hit home because you've parroted back to me that several times. You wonder, are we just feeling more confident but not more accurate?
Yes.
And
That's
that is
always a concern.
it's a big concern. We feel better about the same stuff. I would hate to think that. So I'm hopeful that we will have established now ADP, fantasy points, and now we could look at your MVP. We can look at the Bush, the Com, all the other metrics, and we can then compare. My prediction, my hypothesis is our top 12 are going to be pretty close to everybody else's guesses on
Yes.
ADP.
I believe that. Yep.
I want to think, and there's some evidence in my Bush number that the 13 through 24 might be better. We may have an
Yes.
advantage in the next 12. In other words, and by the third 12, if you can get any kind of above what the public's figuring out, because that, I'm telling you, the success really drops big time in 25th through 36th in ADP, by position. In other words, it gets lean, Dennis. Uh, and I think there's something to be said about rookies. I think there's something to be said about opportunity. And my another hypothesis is that level deeper down is where rookies and opportunity and things really start working there, and your reliance on ADP hurts you more than helps you pretty deep. And I think you're better than zero, circling back around, really excels and gives a big advantage there. So I think our metrics helps us in the mid part of the draft. And I do believe the drafting style deeper in the draft that's better than zero helps us as well. So I've got two big hypotheses, Dennis, that we're going to be looking at the next few years. Folks, notice I say years, not months,
Oh
not
yeah.
seconds, not
Yep.
hours,
Yep.
years, folks. And we just started last year putting metrics together in a giant, we're trying to find that one number like Beyer did in horse racing. If you look up Andy Beyer and horse racing, and if you want to see that concept, and you can look historically and look where we're at today, and you can see where we were and how that advanced the game. I want Dennis and I to have that same advantage in 5 or 6 years to where we've got a lot of that settled and we've got our own buyer number, whatever we're going to call it. And
Yeah. And
that's where we're going. But anyway, that's my grand hypothesis is the top 12 or so. Everybody's pretty much not a big surprise. Yeah, I know CMC last year didn't help you. I understand things happen. Injuries do happen. This is never, or is it going to be a perfect draft? Never. But I
no.
think the tendency is the top 12, the next 12, and the next 12. And deeper in the draft we go, I think you're better than zero is aids us, and I think our metrics really excel in after the first couple rounds. I think we really make our money there. That's what I'm thinking, Dennis. I'm looking at the data here, and I could flash this on the screen, but I'm gonna wait because I want the ADP. Because what I want, Dennis, is have the ADP information, fantasy point information, and now we have a reference. So we can now have the concept. We can look, say, are we as good as that? Because you were worried. Are we just confident about the same accuracy? And
Yeah.
folks, that is really big. So
And-
that is. I'm going to get through here, Dennis, but I get preachy. I'm a professor, and I appreciate you let me get preachy. But anyway, that's where I want us to go. That's our journey, Dennis. We're on a pilgrimage. We are pilgrims in the data world for fantasy football. And I just told you our arc for the next few years. That's what we want to do, folks. And like I said, there's not a lot of folks listening to us. That's fine. I don't care. Not everybody can make it to the end on top of the mountain and find nirvana. But we're going to do that. We're going to be as close as anybody, Dennis, if not better than most in finding that. Okay.
well, well, here's the thing. First of all, we don't ever want to get popular enough that we're screwing up our own drafts, but we are sharing again, not all the secrets, like we hold back a little, but we do give more of the juicy stuff out for free than we probably should. But our whole goal in doing this and our whole goal in doing the podcast, first of all, it's fun. So that's the first thing you should be doing and everything. Number two, doing this podcast, I know, has made us both better fantasy football players because we have discussions that might not come up if you're not taking the time to think through them. And that is part of the scientific method. That's why we have so many seminars, so many conventions and get-togethers in the scientific world, is because sharing ideas and questioning and answering is the way you improve what you're doing. Now, I'm seeing too much on some of the things in science that I'm involved with in the weather world, where we're getting away from that. And we have that same tendency in fantasy football too. It's like, oh, shut up, you're wrong. Versus, what can I learn from this person? Because anybody who's been playing fantasy football for more than 5 years, even the newbies, I bet I can learn something from them. Maybe I'm learning things not to do, but quite often I'm learning new techniques that can then be tried out using the scientific method. And if they work, if somebody presents to me an idea that is statistically proven to blow MVP data out of the water, I'll probably stop doing the MVP index and switching to something smarter. Haven't found it yet. Your Bush number and your COM data
and maybe the
are on the same.
composite.
They're in the correct. They're in the same frame. Okay, so when I look at 6 running backs and I say, they're all in the same tier. When I look at our metrics, if I just look at my metrics, the MVP index is number 1. Number 2 is my upside index, formerly known as Big Ten. And then the third is best index. Best index is really good at forecasting what happened or showing you what happened for a season, but it's very bad at telling you what will happen for the next season. I know that. We've looked at it. We've studied it. With your metrics, I think the Bush number is going to probably be a little better than the COM data. Okay, counts over median. I just think it's going to be a little better. I don't know that yet. That's why you're doing the testing.
Yeah.
But if I compare our metrics, I would say right now, I have more faith in MVP, COM, and the Bush number than I do the other 2 index I'm working on. Now, that doesn't mean those indexes should be tossed away. It just tells me that when I'm looking at a composite of all 6, I'm not so much looking at the sum of all 6. I'm looking at the red flags that pop up. And if I've got a draft pick in that first round, I want no red flags other than injury. I want the guy as bulletproof as possible. Nobody threatening him for a job. Nobody, a good track record being in the top 5 for more than 1 year. And then I'll look at that and I'll say, that's a guy that I'm feeling pretty good about. I want a narrow range of forecasts, all to the goody side. I want a guy in that first round that I say he could be number 1 or he could be number 6 in the league. And if I can accomplish that, I've had a good first round. But I think you're right. Success and failure in our first round, I think we're not going to beat consensus by that much. Maybe at the end of the first round, we might be better than the guys in the first 6. But if we're drafting in the first 6, I think we're drafting chalk one way or the other.
Yeah.
7 through 12, we start getting a little more adventurous. Now, in Dynasty, the difference is the first 4 picks in a Dynasty draft should be pretty chalky. As you go, that's where the advantage comes in, is in those picks that are a little bit later on in the draft.
And the good news is I've got my ADP and fantasy points per game by the rankings, so I could do 1 to 6.
Perfect. And here's the thing, folks. ADP,
7 to 12. Yeah.
ADP, it doesn't mean you look at the ADP and you never stray from it. Okay.
No.
That's not what I'm saying when I say ADP is valuable, but knowing the price of a player. So, in other words, if I got a guy who's being taken RB1, I know that in the past, RB1 has never been worse than 140 in my MVP. If I'm rating a guy at 140, okay, give him to me at the number one pick. But I won't, I will stray from ADP. I'll go 15 spots later than ADP to grab a guy if that guy fits where he is being drafted. In other words, if I'm picking the 11th best running back, I want him to have an ADP over 100, period. Because I know on average, 13 of those guys hit that number. And the worst case is 11 on the low side, 16 on the high side. So if I'm getting the 11th best guy and he's over 100, I'm sleeping good at night. And I don't care where I picked him. If I'm picking him 15 spots ahead of where everybody else is, and I don't think he'll be there the next time I draft, or I've got a strategy for that second round.
Yeah.
That's the way you got to attack a draft. But understanding ADP, not the ADP itself, but understanding ADP is the key to success.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the data that I will bring out, Dennis. We'll talk, but I was just looking at tight ends and just noticing things. I was looking at the top six,
Ugh.
and yeah, and well, last year, uh, Kincaid was the only one of the top
Yeah.
six that
Yeah.
was a failure.
And I had him at an ADP forecast for him.
Yeah.
Okay. I had around 50s, and that is about the eighth. That's about eighth. So I was lower on Kincaid than consensus.
And the year before, 2023,
Oh,
Waller and
yeah.
Pitts were
Yeah.
failures. So you
Oh,
had four successes, two failures.
yep.
2022, we had one failure, Kyle Pitts again. 2021, no failures. It was a good year
Interesting.
for everybody.
Interesting.
2020, we had two failures. Evan Ingram and Zach Ertz were not good. And in 2019, we had one failure. So that's the kind of information when I'm talking about it, folks. It's just knowing of the last, 6 years, we've only had of the top six picks, only 1 year out of the six has been perfect. And when I say perfect, that means of the top six, everybody that at the end of the season were in the top 12.
Very
Now, if you
interesting.
want to say top six, who was in the top six, folks, it gets lean. So last year, the only top six that were in the top six, Trey McBride and Kittle. So Kelsey was seven, Laporta ninth, Andrews eighth, and of course Kincaid 23rd. So I've got that data too. The 2023, it was one, two, three out of six were in the top six, that kind of thing. The 2020, the next year was three. The next year was four. So notice it's not perfect, folks. If you think the top six are going to finish in the top six 100% of the time, if you're getting 50%, that looks like a median year.
And here's an even weirder stat. Okay.
Yeah.
If I look at the top five finishers in MVP among tight ends,
Yeah.
Okay. What did it take to be top five? Well, most years, two out of the last 5 years anyway, you had to finish over 70 on MVP.
Right.
But back in 2022, you only needed 40 on the MVP. So what we see at
Wow.
tight end is there's a limited class worth drafting. And that's what your data is showing because the top six aren't repeating because only maybe three of those are truly elite. And the drop off from 3 to 4 in some instances, in some years, the drop off from 1 to 2
It's
has been
crazy.
greater than the drop off from 2 to
2022, it
12.
was 18.6
Oh,
versus
yeah.
13.5.
Yep.
Kelsey
Oh,
was
gosh.
in
Yep.
that may be his best year as far as compared to the field. That's like Secretariat in the Belmont, Dennis. For
Very
tight
true.
ends, that's finishing five fantasy. I mean, can you imagine having almost a touchdown advantage every week against your league?
Oh, yeah.
You're going to think about it. You're going to win what you're going to win, but those close ones, you got a touchdown advantage going in. Man, Kelsey was something else that year. But folks, that's the kind of data that I'm gathering for Dennis and I. And you know what? You're thinking, Kelsey, well, I'm sorry, his best year might have been 2020. It was 20.8. The
Oh,
next
gosh.
best,
Yeah.
yeah, was 17. So not as big a gap, but still 20.8 points. And but 19, Dennis, he was 16, and Kittle was 15.9.
Oof.
So they were 1-2 in ADP. They were 1-2 finishing. And
Yeah. Here's a bizarre one for you. So in 2020, the top tight end was over 160 in MVP. The second guy was at 100.
Waller,
Correct. The third guy fell off to 70. The
Kittle.
the fifth was in the high 50s.
Well, I can tell, Dennis, when I look at this, we're talking 21, 17 and a half, 15 and a half, 12, 11, 11, 11, 11, 10.6, 10.6,
Crazy.
10.5, 10.4. So I
Crazy.
just told you from 10.4 to 12 point was fourth through eighth. So basically, you either had the top three or you should have waited for, Hunter Henry and you could have got Hunter Henry at 12th that year, in finish. And I don't know he was ninth. So you could have waited 8 picks, grabbed Henry, and he was 10.4, and he was almost as good as Andrews each week at
Whew,
12. And
that's
Andrews
crazy.
cost you a fourth pick.
And,
So
and
and Henry cost you a ninth.
and
So
that's a yeah.
yeah, so if you look at the value there, Henry was better than Andrews at that point. If
And,
you
and
missed on the top three.
and last year, remember I said I think this tight end class is a little deeper. I think we got 3 or 4 elite guys.
Yeah, oh
We had
boy.
four over 90 on
Yeah,
MVP.
Kittle was 15.8, Bowers
Yeah,
15.5, McBride 15.2. Then you had Janu at 13.2,
yep,
Taysom Hill 13.2, Njoku 13.1, Kelsey 12.3, and then Andrews at 11,
yeah.
and then Porter at 10. So the field was really packed. 5 point difference basically from first to 12th, and that you know that's unusual versus, 2023, it was probably the same. But that one year, Kelsey had 18.6, and the 12th best was 9.
That's
Half,
that's crazy.
half,
That's
half.
crazy.
Can you imagine?
Like
All those people that picked that,
so
Fryermuth was 9.9 that year, Schultz and Higbee. If you waited that late and somebody picked Kelsey and paid the premium, they were double. You
so
had to make 9 points. You had to get
yeah.
a touchdown and a half to make up if you were facing Henry in your week. Man, that's a lot to try to make. 9 points is a lot to try to
So
make up
so
as a
that
handicap.
so that year I was in a league where I got invited to join a, as they called it, a league of experts in
Oh boy,
redraft on
Dennis, I'm already concerned with that name.
on ESPN. They were calling it a league of experts, and I
Yeah,
won't mention any of the names it was playing against, but they're
yeah,
all well-known people from Twitter.
yeah,
One quarterback,
yeah.
one tight end, two wide receivers, two running backs. Just a standard regular old PPR league. No tight end premium, nothing. And I got the 12th draft pick. Okay. So I already knew that going in, I was planning to have a different strategy than whatever else I saw unfolding. And I knew there were a lot of zero RB guys that were already in this, it was the hip thing already. Well, I get into the draft and in the league chat, everybody starts joking. Oh, I wonder who the first idiot, they put it, who the first idiot will be to select a quarterback this year.
Yeah,
I took that as an invitation.
yeah,
And then they started saying, well, I wonder who the first idiot will be to pick a tight end. Nobody will pick a tight end in the first round. That would be dumb. That was too much of an invite.
yeah.
So on pick 12, Kelsey, because that way I could be an idiot that way by taking a tight end in the first round. First pick in the second round, took Mahomes. Now I get to be called an idiot twice.
Yeah.
I had one loss all season in the regular season. It was all Kelsey. Like I walked through that league. It was the Kelsey Mahomes bye week that I lost during the regular season.
Yeah.
And then I got beat by somebody blowing up and having like 5 touchdowns in the playoffs. And that's what beat me. But I outscored everybody in the league every week. Like I was the top scoring team 10 weeks. And it wasn't because I was smart. It was because my better than zero strategy worked. It was the first year I was trying that concept out. I didn't have a name for it yet, but it was pick a boatload of running backs after you get your quarterback, tight end, and wide receivers. And it was also a very good year for a couple of my wide receiver choices. Again, I was better on the wide receivers, and strategy helped me have the running backs to get through the year. And then Kelsey and Mahomes just had mammoth years that made me look like a genius. But I was an idiot on draft day,
Yeah.
and I
Idiot genius. Yeah.
only did it to be a wise ass.
Yeah.
I didn't do it
I am
because I thought
shocked that you're a wise ass. I can't, folks, when you come to Expo and meet Dennis, you will be shocked at his demure,
oh
very
yeah,
quiet. You have to poke him to get
oh
anything
yeah,
out of him. He's so
tough,
quiet in his
tough,
opinions. He
tough to
doesn't
get me
give you a
going.
gripe. He nothing. He's just
No,
like dead. He's like a piece of driftwood at the expo. Nothing. He only comes awake when we go to the Hall of Fame for Kansas City and you look at the suite they've built for his team there, right next to the Saints broom closet, and with
and
Breeze in the broom closet.
all I have to do is say I'm a Chiefs fan.
Yeah,
I have
and
to have
they,
them.
oh yeah, they take you immediately to the suite
They
Yes,
do ask me for the password. So the
yeah.
password
Come
I'm
on
not going to
in.
mention, but
Yeah.
you know,
Pinkstram. I know what the
I
password is.
mentioned it, and you overheard it,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it's like, man, they came out with a wheelchair to
Oh
cart
yeah,
me
the Andy
in.
Reid's face shield.
They had that lady with the fan to make sure I was cool. The
Yeah, yeah.
nice cool drinks with the
Yeah,
umbrella.
it was ridiculous there. You
Un,
got
unlimited
the
snacks. I mean, it was
Taylor Swift shaped
oh
popsicles that you could
crazy.
gnaw on while you were
Oh, it was
observing all the
crazy.
trophies and everything. It was ridiculous.
It was crazy. They
Yeah,
treat you like royalty there
yeah.
if
The
you're a
Saints
Chiefs
broom
fan.
closet, they throw some 2 week old boudin at you and say, that there's your treat.
And I do remember when they asked you
Yeah,
what your team, who your favorite team
yeah.
was,
They're still laughing.
and you
Saints.
said,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
you said Saints,
yeah,
and I remember this. The lady
yeah.
said,
Oh, oh yeah,
"Oh, I'm sorry,"
yeah.
you
Yeah, I'm
know,
sorry. We're all sorry.
because she's that's how they treat you there. But it
Yeah.
is what it
They
is.
were
But anyway,
sad for me.
but yeah, let's touch on rookies before we go.
Yeah, I know, Dennis. We got anyway. I've got all this data. It's coming, and I've got the quarterbacks is the last one, but I was just looking at rookies. I was just trying to see some years where they're, and you probably know more about the rookies and who was what and where uh, in the various years. But so I'm not trying to guess rookies or anything. I'm just looking as looking. But I will say last year, ETN and Pachenko were like eighth and 10th, and they pretty much were out of the top 36. So they were two complete failures, and that was a tough year because I'm looking
Yeah.
back. Let's see what year is this? 2020. There was one failure. I think Barkley must have got injured that year, but it's very it's different than tight ends in some ways. So we will have all that data. We'll look at fantasy points per game and ADP, and we'll have numbers, and then we compare our metrics to those, and we'll have at least some idea of where our strengths are for our drafts. It's important for us to know that. So that's coming, Dennis. Let's go back to the rookies. Let me shut this down. So I don't know if I should show this site. I think I'm not, but uh, uh, what do you want to talk about? Sir,
Yeah,
you want to see
actually,
the
actually,
sheets?
yeah. If you do have a,
I do have the cheat sheet
yeah,
for
if
the
you have a cheat
rookies.
sheet, I'd love to see that because I'll tell you where I am concerned. I won't tell you that they're wrong, but I'll tell you
Okay, well,
where
this
I'm
is
concerned.
Fantasy Pros, and I'm not trying to steal their copyright here. Let me share
Well,
that.
I would think they'd enjoy some free publicity because Fantasy Pros, folks, is a very good website, just like
I
Football
subscribe.
Guys.
I am
Yep.
their Hall of Fame. As far as they call it the subscription. The main reason is they have League Sync, and when you're doing 40 or 50 leagues,
Oh
this
yeah.
is the only way that you can check if something like, oh, somebody broke a leg, you can immediately go with their nice software and find out what leagues you better put your waivers in, et cetera, et cetera. So it allows me, you cannot be playing in lots of leagues and not
Oh
have
no.
some type. And I don't know, there may be other places out there, but I
That's
know
the best one. That's the
fantasy pros.
I've tried
Uh,
other ones that are that fantasypros.com, very worthy. Like they're subscription worthy, just
yeah,
like Football Guys
yeah,
is subscription worthy. There is so much data that you can get from both
yes.
sites and they're very affordable.
Yeah, so I would recommend if you're like me and are playing 40 or 50 leagues, like I said, I've got 27 Dennis uh, league credits already. So for FFPC. So $1,900 and 20. I will not get to spend all my money. Then I'm debating. I might try the next money leagues up, Dennis. I'm
Ooh,
debating should I
I think we're
risk.
ready.
It,
I think we're ready.
I'm debating maybe playing five or so. Just put my foot in the water a little bit. I don't know how many of the super sharks are in those. I've found over the years the 35. I've been made money pretty much every year.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
That's a good
but I
level.
don't know. See, the dog's excited. I don't know at the $77 or whatever the next league is for fantasy pros. And I'm debating pulling you into another dynasty just because I need you and I have never drafted a dynasty together when it meant something.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
dynasty that you took over for me, a former fake pigskin guy, Dave Sherney, and I were teaming. He's passed away, so
yeah.
uh, great guy, love him. And you took over for me, and you've made me money because I've lost my butt. I was rudderless, and you've taught me a lot. But it's time for me to take some more learning in Dynasty here.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea to jump into a new league.
So
I
I'm
think would
thinking about
enjoy that.
another startup this year. I've got the money to do it.
Yeah, I think
Anyway,
that would be
here
fun.
is I started the mock draft. And so I think this mock draft I was 12th in rookies, and so when you see a line, that means it's already been
Gotcha.
the top 11 have already been drafted. So anyway, what do we want to start? Is there something you want to talk about based on
Yeah,
your?
absolutely. So here's how I sort the rookies for a rookie draft. Okay. The first thing I do is I say, okay, do I want a quarterback? This is, I'm assuming, is a one quarterback draft.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. So in a one quarterback draft, I'm already going into that usually saying, yeah, probably not going quarterback. This year, even in Superflex, the only quarterback I'd even dare take in the first round is the guy that's the only quarterback
You've been
that I think
taken in the
will be
top. Yeah,
starting on week one, which is Cam Ward,
Campbell.
who's already gone. So,
He's 13th,
yeah,
and in this mock scenario, he's already gone. But just let you know, he
yep,
was 13th on this overall cheat sheet.
yeah, and I would have avoided him anyway because I'm not really,
And Dart is 20th, so
yeah, and I,
seven, like half a round was the next quarter. So there's a gap there.
yeah, and assuming that this is a just a rookie draft
Yeah,
only,
yeah.
um, I don't think Dart is a sure bet to start. So you don't have to have a quarterback when you exit this mock. It's
Yeah.
just who would you like the most. So quarterback's out. Now I look at tight end and I say, okay, is this a tight end
Tyler
premium?
Warren.
Yeah, is this a tight end premium? Are we
Yes,
we going okay? So tight end premium, then I'd have to think about tight ends.
he's
Otherwise,
8th.
Otherwise, if it's a starting one tight end league and it's not tight end premium, I don't even consider a tight end in the first round.
Indianapolis, they do, I will say historically, they do use
Oh
tight
yeah.
ends.
Yep.
Historically, they have used too many,
Yes.
and if you find the hot one, then you might ride along, but just be aware they got a lot out there that could vulture, especially from a rookie. In other words, he may pay off. He may be somebody you might want to trade for if he looks like he's getting a lot more attention than you expect. So I would put a star by him if I had a dynasty tie, regular league. If he started getting a lot of the touches, that would be a surprise. In other words, I would be looking early. Or is he surprising me in opportunity? Right now, I'm saying probably not. But if I was dynasty, that's how I would track him.
Yeah, and when I say I'm leaving the
Yeah, yeah,
quarterbacks and the
right.
tight ends out, it's like I'm leaving it out of the first sort. Now,
Yeah.
if I get back to either position, and here's the thing, is I would have had this even if Cam Ward and Tyler Warren were on the board right now at 12. I would first sort through the data. I would say, nope, I don't think a quarterback or a tight end is a lock to hit the top 6 this year. So, or the top 10 even. I only had Tyler Warren at a 60% chance of hitting top 12. So I'm not going to change that much. And top 6 at tight end is what you're really looking at. And, I don't even think he's going to be, because we know that 7 through 12 are going to be almost the same. So it, do I think he's got the chance to hit top 6? Maybe 30%. Do I think he has a chance to hit top 3, being like a significant factor in winning or losing your? No, I don't. Just for the reasons you stated. It has nothing to do with the player. It has to do with the fact that I don't think the Colts offense is going to be one of the top 5 in the league. And they do play a lot of 12 personnel. So you got 2 tight ends on the field. That's going to limit his upside. So first sort through this data, no quarterback, no tight end, even if they were available. Now I look at running backs because in a dynasty draft, especially from the 12 slot, I'm going to compare my running back talent to my wide receiver talent. That's the first sort of data that I'm going to do. So if I look at the top 3 running backs that are available, Caleb Johnson, RJ Harvey, Cam Skatebo, I look at opportunity. Johnson's going to he's got a shot at being an everyday back with Pittsburgh. Harvey's got a shot at being an everyday back
Do
with
you think
Denver.
Jonte and Hamilton are really 1-2? Is there a gap?
There's a big gap between 1 and 2.
That's what I'm
So,
saying. But this, you can't see that gap. That's
no,
why
no.
your percentage allows us to say about that. So if
Yeah,
we were starting, we had the first pick, he'd be your first pick. Ashton would be your first pick.
it'd either be him or it'd
Yeah.
be the top wide receiver because I
McMillan.
think McMillan and
So it probably
Giante,
depend on your team.
correct, correct.
Right. So if
Eh,
it was our dynasty team, we probably need running back.
We'd go running back for sure. Now, if I didn't have an obscene wealth of either, let's say I'm pretty even at both positions,
Yeah.
and I'm picking number 1, and I can pick between the top running back or the top wide receiver, and I've got them,
Historically, you'll
and
get more years out of the wide receiver.
amen. And I'll also have a better chance of that wide receiver getting into that lead pecking order. If the opportunity index tells me that McMillan's coming into a team where he's got to compete with Xavier Legette and Thielen. Well, Thielen's a good player, okay, but he's not going to be. He's older, a year older than he was last year, so
And
he's
he was
more.
discounted,
Oh
Dennis.
God, yeah,
I really enjoyed him in the stretch. He
oh
helped me
yeah,
in a few leagues.
and I'll love him in a few leagues again. But when you look at Thielen last year,
What was his MVP last year?
his MVP was a solid 70. So he was a
So there,
WR he was a WR2 guy.
yeah, but what I'm hearing is McMillan has the opportunity to be the alpha then. He can
Correct.
move into that role.
Thielen was at 70, Leggett was at 23,
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Coker was at 33.
No.
So wide
Yes.
open. Wide open.
Opportunity says it's wide open.
Not only is it wide open, but having a guy at 70 is a lot better than having the second guy at a 25, because
Right.
if you've got Thielen on the field
Right.
and you
Sort of
just
draws some
naturally
attention.
you double McMillan, Thielen's going to beat you. So
Yeah.
you've got to play Thielen honest. And hey, Leggett, 23.1 for his MVP for the whole season. But if you look at his best 6 games, he's closer to 70s. So you got two guys to take the heat off of McMillan. I like that. But you got McMillan, who's going to be a number one. So
Gotcha.
I would have been toss up between McMillan and Giante. So I've got both guys equally good, both guys in a tier of their own. And then I'll look at, okay, am I filthy with wide receivers? Is McMillan not likely to be in my lineup week 1? If I've got 4 wide receivers that are over 90 on MVP, I'm probably looking at the running back at that point. If I've got openings, if I've got, maybe I've got a guy that's 110, my next guys are 80 and 80. Whew, I like being able to put a guy who might be 100.
Mm-hmm.
We know that rookies can hit 100 or
Right.
better.
Right.
So forecasting 100 for his top side, for his ceiling, is not an outrageous number.
Gotcha.
And I know Thielen produced a 70 in that offense. McMillan's younger. He's more athletic at this point in his career. 70 is probably the minimum he's going to do if we're right about him being a good NFL prospect. So that's how I'd sort through the data. Looking at where you are now,
I'm pick 12.
the question was, is Hampton number 2? And
Yes.
the answer is maybe. I can't split right now Henderson, Hampton, Judkins, and Caleb Johnson. Of those 4, 3 of them were drafted in the 20s and 30s. And you know how I group now.
Yeah.
That's close enough. Hampton was the second off the board at 22. That's why he's the second here. But what I'm telling you is Johnson's got as good, actually a better path to the starting position, because who does Hampton have to beat out? Najee Harris. And I know people love to laugh about Najee Harris. You know what his MVP was?
What was it?
In his career? I will share that with you because it will probably surprise some people, because he's not as much of a stiff as you might think. Like, he gets that reputation of, oh, he's lousy. Last year, 75. That's not horrible. Opens the door to Hampton winning that job. The year before, he was 41. But in 2022 and 2021, Najee Harris was over 100 on MVP. He's entering his age 27 season, still under where guys start falling off. He's not a stiff. So Hampton's got to be really good. 75 as the MVP index last year tells me, again, Pittsburgh, not the greatest offense last year. Chargers probably better offense this year. I was forecasting Harris to be probably mid 80s this year. Let me actually pop it up because I already did the math on him. Prior to what they did in the draft, my MVP forecast for him was a 90 even for Harris.
Yep.
It'll drop because Hampton's a threat to his touches. So he is not a definitive number 2, in my opinion. There are 4 guys that are pretty equal. Well, it just so happens one of those 4 is Hampton. Is Caleb Johnson, who was still on the board at 12 for you.
Yeah, I picked Golden.
Golden is a good pick as well.
And Johnson.
Oh, So you got both of them.
Yes, I was on the river. Yeah,
Oh, that is the ultimate double up.
yeah,
And that's the double up that I got in an upstart dynasty league that I joined. We drafted our veterans right before the draft.
yeah.
So we had to guess who was going to be replaced. And well, I guess some right, I guess some wrong.
Yeah.
Now the rookie draft, we're doing it in reverse order from what we started. So I was number
Right.
4 in the veteran draft. So I was number 9. But because it's a first rookie draft, we did it in a snake form. So I had 109 and then 24. I took Caleb Johnson in the first round and got Golden in the second. So I did exactly the same thing that you did
Yeah,
and got the same 2 guys.
yeah. I like it. I think that was a good. I mean, I don't care about the rest of it. I just wanted to have a little discussion. So can I? I think I might be leagued sync uh, with our. Let's see if I can. Maybe I'll stop sharing for a sec. I think I was thinking about pulling up our.
Our dynasty
Yeah,
and
let's
do a
see if
mock
I.
for our dynasty.
Yeah,
That'd be fun.
I was trying to see if I could pull that up. I don't know if it's. You can tell this is a Sunday, and because Dennis and I are having way too much fun here. Let's see. Trying to see if I can sync your league. Let's see if I thought I'd already been synced, but maybe you have to resync every year. I don't know. Let's see. Choose a sport, other. Let's see. FFPC. Let's see. Let's see. I'm trying to sync our league, see if it will allow us to sync here. I would have thought we were already synced, but let's see. Yep, they found us.
All right.
So log sync, there we are, standard, draft wizard, my playbook. So if we pull up my playbook, Dennis, let's see, my team. I'm curious what uh, if you're curious about projections, I wonder. Oh, they're not showing much yet. They just got the stats and but projections for 2020, they have not projected yet for 2025 here. They did say, and I'll share this with you. Uh, this is their current projections for us. Let's see. They say golf is number 9 out there. Quarterbacks.
I'd say
Burke,
that's reasonable.
Bucky's 6. Chuba is 17. And then it drops way down. Lamb is 3. Higgins 14. Smith is 26. Waddle 29.
Ooh, I like
Cup,
that.
yeah. And then Hawkinson is 4. And then Ertz is 18.
I like that.
And Packers is 14. So we probably will be
We stream a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we will be streaming. So I'm wondering, overview. I don't know if they'll uh, overview. Let's see, research. Trying to see if we could do I was trying to figure out. Oh, Draft Wizard, Draft Simulator. I wonder if we can do a Draft Simulator. Select the league.
So I actually have Goff tied at QB8 with
Right,
Prescott, Nix, and Mahomes. Now, when
right,
I do my forecasts
right,
of MVP, I do it on by the fives. So I
right.
do 90, and then my next forecast would be 95, then 100. I don't do 91, 92. I don't anticipate that I'm that accurate. So I keep it to fives. So I end up with a lot of ties, which I'm okay about because you should tier your players anyway. And, a 5 point difference is kind of its own little tier. 10 is definitely a teardrop.
Yeah.
But we're on the same, I'm not very radical from reality there of what these guys are forecasting.
Yeah, yeah. I was trying to figure out if we could do our rookie draft yet. I guess we can't. Or I don't know how to do it, Dennis, probably is that. So load uh, draft against experts, start our draft. I wonder if I hit start our draft, what does it do? I don't know if it knows we're 11th. I guess it does.
All
Oh, it's
right.
trying
Oh
to
no, it's doing a
restart
whole new
the
draft. Yeah.
whole new deal. Yeah, well, yeah, let's do it, Dennis. Let's do the whole new deal. So that doesn't help there. We need to, I'm not sure I can do the rookie drafts here or not here. So anyway, that's what it says. So I'll see if we can mock our rookie draft. I don't know if we can or can't uh, there. But anyway, that's where we're at with some of we're pick 11 and 203. So we would love to pick up Golden,
Yes.
but if Johnson's available, we would take
Johnson
him.
will probably go running back, but the perfect scenario
Mhm.
is if we can get if you have Johnson, who's one of my top six or top five running backs in this
Right.
class.
Yeah,
If he falls
right.
to 11, it's a slam dunk pick. And I think it's possible because people like RJ Harvey better than him.
You think some people are going to do
Yeah.
Cam Ward and a tight
Yes.
end
Yes.
since,
Somebody will probably take the tight ends. Yes.
okay.
So one of the tight ends will be gone. Maybe Cam Ward will be gone. It depends on how desperate they are. It's a one quarterback league, so I don't know.
So it's possible.
It's
We,
possible we could get Caleb Johnson. If we don't get Caleb Johnson and Golden is still on the board, I would be tempted to take Golden. Even though we're great at wide receiver, we have Cup aging. So now if we can add Golden to our already relatively young and outstanding mix, because we've got three guys that are second bananas right now. He could be the first on his team. And so that would give us CeeDee Lamb and Golden, which would be an amazing combination if I'm right about Golden.
right.
And past history tells us that we're probably close on Golden. And again, I've got Golden's downside in the low 30s
Yeah.
this year. So I'm not forecasting an absolute stud lock superstar. But what I'm saying is his upside is really damn good. So first round of a fantasy draft, I'm taking the best player available. I don't care about strength and weakness.
Okay.
If I've got two players pretty close, I'm probably going to feed the weakness. They don't have to be. I could think higher, for instance, of Caleb Johnson over. Let's say I felt that Golden was far superior to Johnson. I
Mhm.
got him pretty close. But let's say, for sake of the argument, I thought Golden, I thought a wide receiver that was on the board was an absolute lock stud, better than the running back. then I'm probably going wide receiver. But if they're close, I'm probably going to the running back, even if he's rated a little bit below that wide receiver.
Right.
That's the strategy that I like to use. Second round, I'm going to fill a need. Okay. So second round, and again, doesn't mean I'm locking in and I'm never straying from this strategy, but you have a decision tree. And I should write an article about this for rookie drafts.
Yeah.
Decision tree, first round, take the best guy. I don't care who. Second round, you're looking to fill a need.
Right.
And that doesn't mean in super flex in first round, I wouldn't take a quarterback, even if I didn't need a quarterback. I'm taking the best player available. And even in one quarterback leagues, if I thought Cam Ward was a lock to be the next Pat Mahomes, and he was ready, he was there at 11, I'd take him, even though we're quarterback rich, because we can trade a quarterback away. Mm-hmm. But that first pick, I'm taking best player available no matter what.
Do you think Stroud is going to make some forward moves this year?
Yes, I do. They got him two very good wide receivers to go with Nico Collins. That makes me smile. They actually got him a project tight end and a guy that I will take in deeper sleeper fantasy football leagues where I can stash a player. Mm-hmm. Probably every fourth round draft pick I take will be a guy by the name of Luke Leachy out of Iowa. He landed with Houston. Gotcha. He's got a leg problem, a knee problem right now. He might be a red shirt this year. He might not play his entire rookie year. But he's so potentially good at this NFL football thing, and I think it could be the receiving side of his game that's better than his blocking side of the game, that Houston used the 255th pick in the draft. So it was late. It was 7th round. It was in the supplemental picks. But they still drafted this guy because they wanted control of him. That's how good this guy could be, but he's got an injury history. So he's only a 4th or 5th round pick for me. He's my last pick in the draft in most dynasty leagues if I have a taxi spot to stash him. But first round, best player available, no matter what. Second round, you start looking to fill a need. If there's nobody there that you think is good enough to fill that need, and there's a better player at another position, you still take that better position. But if the tie goes to, and even the edge goes to filling that need, because I play dynasty closer to redraft than anything else. Second round in redraft is like 10th, 12th round in redraft, where you start saying, oh, what have I not taken enough of yet? No. And quite often in redraft, because of the better than zero, that's a running back. So second round in dynasty, I'm usually looking running back. And in this case, I probably will look exclusively running back for our team with that 203 because it's a need. Mm-hmm. 211, I will make a decision based on obviously who's left. But let's say there's 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers, pretty equal where I think their upside is. Feeding a running back again. Mm-hmm. Now, when it gets to the third round, I have a slightly different strategy. Mm-hmm. I'm still looking position, but I'm looking to protect a position. Again, back to the better than zero. What do we like to do in better than zero? If the price is right on ADP, we like to get both sides of the running back duo. And in some cases, in some years, hey, how would it have been to have Gibbs and Montgomery both on your team the last couple of years? And you could do it with the ADPs and you could play them both
both.
weeks, and they would help. They would be fine. That's the rare situation. But on our team, we've got Chuba Hubbard.
So
Okay.
if you had both of those, if you could have got about 24 to 26 points a week
Oh
from
gosh.
both, you're hitting that median number.
If I'm hitting 25 plus by playing them both, I'm happy.
Yeah, yeah,
So in our case, our team's case, when it comes to Carolina,
yeah.
they drafted Travis Etienne's younger brother Trevor,
Mm-hmm.
who played at Georgia. Now, I'm not telling you that I think that the younger Etienne is going to be better than the older Etienne. I don't know. But what I know is that a NFL team thought enough of him to draft him early enough, like in the low hundreds with draft picks. That tells me they think he's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Playing at Georgia, that's good pedigree for me.
Mm-hmm.
His brother had a 68.8 as a rookie, then went up to a 105.9, then dropped down to a 46 last year.
Yeah.
So 70 for his kid brother. If he's a little bit better, 70, 75 might be the forecast for him. That's not bad. And it protects us in case Chuba Hubbard goes to the bench. Now, if Chuba Hubbard goes to the bench, Rico Dowdle could be the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have two of the three on the depth chart. And I feel better having two of the three than one of the three in
Wasn't
a
there a
situation
rookie
like that.
Brooks? Brooks? No,
No, it was Etienne.
Etienne.
Yeah,
But
Etienne was the
doesn't
guy they drafted.
Carolina
Well, oh,
didn't
yeah. Last year they drafted Brooks. He is going to be out another year. He hurt his knee in the,
what?
yeah,
Wow.
he hurt his knee in the next to last game of the season last year when they brought him out as a rookie. Cooked another knee, and he is back down and out and is not expected to be back. That's why they signed Rico Dowdle, and that's why
Okay.
they drafted another rookie. Now, next year, that makes Chuba Hubbard expendable, and Chuba Hubbard's contract says he's expendable at that point. And
Yeah.
then Brooks could be a guy we're looking at because he'll sneak way under the radar at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is in that third round, I'm looking not just at need, but to protect something I've already got on the roster. So, in other words, let's say we had Jaden Reed on our roster.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I'm protecting him with the rookie, and I'm feeling good about that. If I can protect a spot that I was counting on to be a starter with his rookie replacement, now I've got that position locked up for next year, unless somebody else jumps in there, but I'm increasing my odds at success. Then in our draft, once you get to the fourth round in our draft, the rookies are getting a little thin, but you're allowed to draft veterans at that point as well.
Yeah.
So we'll be taking a hard look at all the veterans that were released before the draft because there might be some running backs out there that they could win the second spot on the depth chart. And maybe somebody will be as crazy as releasing Rashad White, and then we might take him as early as the third round because we can protect our Bucky Irving share.
Yeah. That'd be
But
nice.
that's the way I think in fantasy football. For instance, in a that brand new dynasty league.
Yeah.
So I bet on Dallas and Chicago not drafting a running back high. So I took DeAndre Swift for the Bears, and then much, much later, I took a wild card pick on Miles Sanders.
Yep.
Miles Sanders had a good game last year with Carolina.
Yep.
So his competition in Dallas this year, if you look at the depth chart,
Yeah.
his competition is Javonte Williams.
Yep.
We're not crazy about Javonte Williams. Okay. He had an MVP score of 33 last year.
Yeah.
His career high is 64.
Mm-hmm.
He's got only 2 seasons above 60 out of his 4 years in the league. That's a vulnerable guy. You compare that to Miles Sanders. Sanders had a high MVP of 83 back in 2020. Then he dropped to a 36, had a 58.8, and 2 years in a row where he hasn't qualified. But his MVP last year in part-time duty was an 80.
Mm-hmm.
He was worth a late pick. I grabbed him pick 22 in the draft.
Yeah.
That was it. So I only had two more picks. I picked uh, Nick Westbrook Akine, and I think I had Eric All or somebody like that. I went really late with Sanders. He was still there. I was like, what the hell? I'm taking him. But I went solely on opportunity to be in the starting lineup, and that's how I picked it. But coming back in the rookie draft, what I did was I protected that share of Miles Sanders by grabbing Jadon Blue with the 3.9 pick, 3.09 pick. So ninth pick in the third round, my last pick in the draft. We only went 3 rounds deep. And I picked Blue, and I'll stick him on the taxi squad. But that's the way you've got to think in fantasy football drafts. In Dynasty, you got to protect your shares of a player. And quite frankly, let's say Philadelphia drafted another really good wide receiver that we liked.
Yep.
I would not worry about going for their third wide receiver. Doesn't mean you start him year one, but they're not going to sign. Maybe they let AJ Brown or they let Devonta Smith go free agent. Now that rookie plugs in as the first or second best guy on that team, and you've got him already stashed as bench player for you. Now he graduates up the list into a starting role. That's the kind of guy you take in the third and fourth round in dynasty drafts, if they're available. And if a third wide receiver is drafting into a situation that's crowded, you will get him in the third or fourth round of your rookie draft because people won't be thinking that far out. But we see guys change teams all the time. Cooper Kupp changed teams this year, opened up opportunities for other possible players. So it's, there's always these chess pieces moving, and I don't mind having the backup to one of my starters just to protect myself.
Nice.
For the years ahead. But that's the way I think in dynasties. I'm always thinking of
You need to do an article on that.
yeah, I'll put an article together on
Yeah.
basic rookie draft strategy because I think it'll be again different than the way the consensus does it. A lot of people will have their cheat sheet. They'll go 1 through 36. And if they're at pick number 12 and the 12th guy is there, that's the guy they're taking. And then at pick 24, if pick number 8, if 18 on their cheat sheets there, they'll take 18. It doesn't. Now, I'm not suggesting that's not a strategy. I'm just suggesting that I think a little better strategy is best player available and then look to fill needs in the second round. And why I say second round is because by the third round, you are throwing darts. 20, look at that sheet that you showed us. How many players in skill positions were drafted in the first 3 rounds? Pretty skimpy number.
Yep.
There were 10 taken in the first, 11 taken in the second, 10 taken in the third. That's 31 players, and you got 36 that get drafted in the first 3 rounds
Right.
of a dynasty draft. You have to start taking some shots. And that's why I say third, fourth, and even if you're rookie draft, I have some that go out to 7. And people are laughing. They're like, oh, I don't have anybody to pick. I always have somebody to pick because there's always a rookie or an undrafted free agent that a team picked up, and they did so because there's questions at the first and second position. So early on, first round of the draft, I'm not taking anybody. I'm looking at somebody who can be the number one player at his position on that team. And if there's still one of those left at the end of the first round, I'm taking that over somebody who is a number 2 on his own team. By the time I get to the third, fourth, fifth round, if he's just going to make the roster,
Yeah.
and he protects a position I already own, that's the way you go about it. And that's how I end up with both sides of the starters for a particular team. I've got a lot of teams, got a couple, I shouldn't say a lot, I've got a couple of fantasy teams where I've got DeMarcado and Connor, and then I drafted Benson. Now, it doesn't mean I won't release DeMarcado when Benson and Connor are the obvious first and second, but how would you like to have the first, second, and third guys on a depth chart for this year? Next year, one of those guys gets traded, and all of a sudden you've got, instead of having one viable player out of 3 is leading his team, now you got 2 that could be leading his team, and you've got the backup to one of them. And then if you've really been smart, you'll now draft the backup to the other guy. So I like to have 2 of the 3 parts of a backfield in Dynasty if I can do it. And that way I'm protected against injury, because if my number 1 guy goes down, I've got a backup to stick right in there, no matter what else happens. When you draft somebody else's backup, you now need 2 injuries to make that guy a viable starter. To me, that seems like a no-brainer, that I'd only like to have it take 1 injury to make a player viable on my fantasy football team.
Put that article out, Dennis.
I will do. So head on over to the scienceoffantasyfootball.com. You can check out my pre-draft rookie articles. I'll have a follow-up here post-draft as well. There's already a first round way too early prognostication. And yeah, I'll share my rookie theory for Dynasty Fantasy Football. The professor has a lot of data, and look at his
It's
lesson.
coming. It's coming.
Look at his
Maybe.
lesson plans, folks.
Know.
Look at his lesson plans too, because this is the time of the year that you should be learning better techniques, and even techniques on handling your own data. And then head on back here next week for another edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
Get to work, folks. Whew. I don't think
I can't believe we went 2 hours, man. That was crazy.
Yeah, it's now 9:30. We started. What time? It's 12. I got almost 1 o'clock.
Yeah, we're about 3 hours. We've been chit-chatting.
Yeah, I hope there's 2 or 3 that will listen. Thank you that are listening. I would take notes.
Yes.
And
this is a graduate level course you're getting.
Yeah, you got to take notes. You got to take notes. Anyway, I'm gonna stop recording. It's a lot of fun. We got to talk Kentucky Derby here. We got to get some.
Oh yeah.
We got to get some picks here, Dennis.